If we could get a quick roll call.
Miranda. Maniscalco. Clendenin. Young. Carlson. Vera. Hertek.
Here.
We have physical form.
Thank you. It was brought to our attention by an email over lunch that for number 9, we did not approve it for the exact amount of money. Thank you, Mr. Bishop, for always keeping us honest. So we, the agenda item listed $2.5 million, but we chose a different amount. So I'm going to leave it to the maker of the motion to correct.
Yeah, so for item number 9, the amount should be $1.75 million, not the 2.5 as you see.
So 1.75. Board Member Carlson, do you still retain your second? Okay, so all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you again so much. Okay, now we are going to move on by request to item number 11.
Okay, good afternoon, B. Park, CRA Community Development Coordinator, and I'm here to present the 801 Whiting LLC project for 22 of workforce housing units within the downtown CRA. This again has a 50-year rent restriction. It's going to produce 22 workforce units. Cater to 80% AMI to up to 140% AMI. Right there, the CAC did approve the $4 million request, fully supported by the CAC, and it's to produce 22 units. I do have the developer here for a brief presentation. Do we want to move forward with that presentation?
Sure.
Okay, so can I get the 801 Whiting LLC presentation loaded? Yes. and then you invite that.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Craig Bizarski with Bendon Road Development. I'm here with Chris Bijot with Landings Real Estate Group. We are here to present 801 East Whiting Street and a proposal for 22 affordable and workforce housing units. Our goal here is to help make downtown Tampa a more vibrant place to live. We're located at the corner of Jefferson and Whiting, across from Embark Collective and the Aurora, and a 3-minute walk from Water Street. So here you can see a project rendering as well as a current picture of the building. We are 100% complete and just opened. So here's a quick overview of the building. So it's a brand new 8-story, 104-unit apartment complex. We have studios and 1-bedrooms with high-end finishes, Z-line appliances, full-size Electrolux washer dryers, tile bathrooms, glass shower enclosures, solid core doors, and sound studio quality windows. So we do abut the Selman Expressway, so we included 45 STC rated triple pane windows, which are sound studio quality windows. So when you walk into one of our units, you don't hear anything from the outside. This is an ideal location for affordable and workforce housing units. We're located, again, a 3-minute walk from Water Street in downtown Tampa. We're a mile from Ybor and Armature Works. We have easy access to the Selman, I-75, I-275, and I-4. We're also abut the Tampa Greenway, and we're close to a dash stop, as well as the trolley. The CRA recently approved a similar request for affordable housing about a mile away in the Encore District, and what makes our building unique, again, is that renters will be able to live within a few-minute walk of where they work and where they go out. Half of our units are long-term rentals on floors 6 through 8. The other half are short-term rentals on floor 2 through 5. We have on-site and off-site parking. 78 of our units will have the Ori Cloud Bed, which provides renters with a bed and a couch, and I'll get into that a little bit more later. And we also have a full amenity package. So we have a co-working space, package room, pool, fitness center, outdoor kitchen, a full amenity package. So here are some pictures of the interiors of our units. You can see, again, our high-end appliances, 36-inch French door fridges, Cruise backlit mirrors, glass shower doors, and again, the windows that are triple pane windows. Here is a sample floor plan of one of our studios, as well as one of our 1-bedrooms. You can see in the studios the positioning of our Ori bed, which I'll get into now. So with the Ori bed, so when a renter walks into one of our units, you'll see the picture up top. So you'll have a couch, you'll have a TV, a coffee table, you'll be walking into your living room. And then when you want to go to sleep, you press a button, use your phone, say, Alexa, lower my bed. The bed then lowers onto the ground, the back of the couch becomes the headrest for your bed, and now you have your 1-bedroom. So this provides two major affordable benefits. One is the renter doesn't have to buy the bed and the couch, which are the two most expensive parts of furnishing an apartment. And then second, you get this expandable furniture where you're turning a studio effectively into a 1-bedroom. So here's an overview of the development. Again, we're 8 stories, 104 units, 85% studios, 15% 1-bedrooms. The first floor is where we have our leasing office, lobby, mail package room, co-working space. Second floor, we have 6 studios in our fitness center, which overlooks Jefferson. The third floor, we have 13 studios, as well as our pool, which overlooks Water Street. And then 4 through 8, we have 14 studios and 3 1-bedrooms. So here's a summary of our proposal. We're proposing 22 affordable and workforce housing units, ranging from studios and 1-bedrooms. We're primarily targeting 80% AMI, so over half of our units will be at 80% AMI, 12 at 80%, 5 at 120%, and 5 at 140%. We're requesting a $4 million grant, which you can see here complies with the CRA grant guidelines. We've included a 50-year rent restriction, and then importantly, our affordable units will be the same as our market rent units. Here you can see a chart we put together showing market rent for studios and 1-bedrooms at $2,475 for studios and $3,100 for 1-bedrooms in the downtown area. Importantly, at the 80% AMI, you can see a $1,000 difference between a market rent studio and an 80% AMI studio, and a $1,500 difference for a one-bedroom. In the second chart, you can see the CRA contribution of $300 per month per studio or per apartment, which will be a contribution, and then the rent loss by capping the rent of $683 per unit, or $180,000 annually. Here's our budget and sources of uses. So we are about $36.7 million. We have a $17,750,000 loan, about $15 million of equity, and we're asking for $4 million as a CRA contribution. So our goal here is to help make downtown Tampa a more vibrant place to live, work, and play. And a key part of that vision is providing affordable housing to people who would not otherwise be able to afford to live downtown. So this includes medical students at USF Medical, nurses and staff at Tampa General Hospital, employees at startup companies at Embark Collective, and restaurant and retail workers that service Water Street and the downtown market. By keeping our units affordable, we're enabling people in these essential roles to live within walking distance of where they work, creating a more diverse, active, and connected downtown, which not only benefits our development, but the entire urban core. So now I'll pass it to Chris. I can tell you a little bit about his affordable qualifications.
I've been doing affordable housing for Christopher Bichot. Been doing affordable housing for about 30 years. Specifically worked in the LIHTC program, low-income housing tax credit, built about 5,000 units in the Midwest, in the Southeast. And in our current company, we do a lot of 80% of AMI for not only rental, but also for sale. And the way the world's moving is if we don't provide affordable housing in all, for all different types of the communities and municipalities, we're gonna end up with a very bland, or places that have basically a donut hole, where those places are gonna lack affordable housing where we need it the most. And the opportunity I think we present is the person who's maybe young out of college, or somebody who works in the hospitality business and works a block away at the JW Marriott or works at Tampa General, you know, has the opportunity to live where they work downtown. And it's outpriced for most people who have those employment. So bringing more of that downtown is going to keep downtown not only exciting, but I think it also provides kind of the way you would kind of work your way up in life through the ladder. And it gives that people that first step to really participate in the downtown vibrancy. So, and the other thing I was saying to Craig earlier was, this isn't manana. I mean, we can have 22 affordable units in 30 days downtown. So we're not, you know, we're not asking for pre-dev money. We're not hoping to build something in 2 years. We're bringing affordability today. And I think that is also an advantage. I've been doing this a long time, and usually we're coming in front of people saying, oh, in 3 years, you're gonna have affordable housing. And I think we present an opportunity where we can actually impact the affordable housing today. But thank you very much. We really do appreciate it.
Okay, wonderful. Board Member Maniscalco.
So you said a little bit what I was going to say, because you had mentioned, you know, USF medical students or somebody working at Tampa General, but what about the hospitality industry? Because within walking distance, you'll have a 5-star hotel, The Addition, with a Michelin star restaurant. High dollar places where, you know, those that are working as servers, as bartenders, you know, they're going to make a little bit more in tips than you would at, you know, a typical middle class establishment. So it's nice that they can walk to work. They don't need a car. If I lived down there, I wouldn't leave the district, because with everything going on, and then the use of the streetcar and the use of the Riverwalk, I mean, you have everything there on top of the second phase of Water Street, everything that's coming in, and Gasworks. It's, I mean, as the district grows, you're going to need stuff like the housing like this to accommodate those that are working in the service industry, because there's a lot of jobs. It's not just the manager of the hotel, it's everybody else in between. I never knew that there was a bed that you could remote control essentially like that, which is great, because, you know, if you're a single individual, you don't need a lot of space. And this makes it where they have a quality housing experience in downtown, which it is. I mean, I'd move in there right now. I'm married and we have 2 girls, but if I were single, if I were out of college, and I were working, you know, as a bartender or as a server in one of the restaurants, I'd love to live there. You know, it's great. You don't need a car, which is a huge expense at the end of the month. And then, you know, if they're focusing on, I think I saw close to like $1,500
Yeah.
for the studio. Yes, it's expensive because you know, when I got my first apartment, it was $800 for
I'm with you.
2 bedrooms, 2 baths. But no, this is great. And like you said, in 30 days, we're not waiting. Oh, years down the
That's right.
road, we can accommodate people that are waiting for housing
Yeah.
now, being near where they work and everything else I said. So this is exciting. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, Board Member Clendenin.
Valerie wants that bed so that she can just like you push it and put you up in the wall.
No, this actually goes to the ceiling.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so do we have any motions? So I have a motion by Board Member Maniscalco, a second by Board Member Clendenin. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you, congratulations.
Thank
We
you
look
all
forward
very
to
much. We really appreciate
seeing
it.
this move forward. Yay. Okay, so we are going to, we're gonna go backwards and go back to item number 6. Actually, yeah. Do we want to do 6 or do we want to get through 8?
You said 6 or 8?
Yeah.
Yes, we can go with 8.
Okay, so
Yes.
we're trying to get some of these quicker ones done so we can settle in for the conversation.
Yes, item 8 is revolving around a request for Curtis Hixon Park improvements, and we have a representative from Parks and Recreation here, Mr. Monk.
Great.
I'm going to call Mr. Monk forward at this time, and if we can cue up the PowerPoint. Thank you.
Yep, it is up.
All right, hey, I'm Tony Monk from Parks and Recreation, Planning and Design. We go back in time a little bit. The original request was from June of '24, and I will tell you, the condition of the park has not improved in a year and a half. But what this process has allowed us to do, Parks and Rec wants to be following all the right processes and procedures when we're requesting CRA funding, and that's where I became involved, was to make sure that we were following the procedures. And what this process allowed us to do was expand on our director's original letter from a year and a half ago, provide some supporting information, and demonstrate the need that the park has. So that's what we're going to do. So we start with some images of a demand. And I'll say working with the CRA staff was very helpful too. They helped us sort of consolidate this presentation and really get to the meat of what we're here to talk about. So I think everybody's aware of the demand on Curtis Hixon Park. The one thing that's interesting is in 2010, when it opened, the museum was just opening. There was not a completed Riverwalk. We didn't have nearly as many residential units downtown. And when the Riverwalk got connected, it was like a switch was flipped. And the demand on the park increased. We had residents come online. So there's a lot more demand in the park, and it shows. It's the pavement and the lawn, you can see in the image there, the lawn just takes the worst of it. The pavement obviously struggles with the number of events that we have. We thought we were going to get some relief when Julian B. Lane opened, and we had a lot of events go to, Councilmember Maniscalco was already shaking his head. He knows. We just created, it's like latent demand on the highway. We gave another place, and we just had more events. And that's what we're experiencing. So we imagine when the band shell gets done at Perry Harvey, that's probably not going to take a lot of demand off of Curtis Hixon. It's just going to be more places for us to have more events, which goes into the economic development argument and the Parks and Rec argument, all the things the CRA is here for. So I think y'all are aware of it. We also took the opportunity to refine the concept diagram and sort of prioritize the most critical needs for the park. And we started thinking about if we're going to tear up all this pavement and put down heavy truck rated reinforced concrete, what other things would it make sense to do? We realized we're missing canopy trees on Ashley, which is probably at the time there was an interest just to have this open grand lawn view. We need shade in Tampa, so as long as we're chewing up the pavement, we want to add shade. We want to get more durable finishes out there. We want to just long-term have a more maintainable facility. So we're going to try to leverage this durability event improvement to get other improvements for the park. And then last slide is just sort of breaking down where we call primary improvements. We were hoping to get the things at the bottom in there too, but as we started building the cost estimate up to our original request from 2024, we ran out of money in our estimate. And so we put these secondary items lower, but in a design build approach, we're hopeful, we're gonna include that in the RFQ and the criteria package. And if the budget works out, we'll try to get some of those secondary things. And in our conversation with the CAC, one of the things they mentioned as being very important was the bathroom situation. They're 15 years old, and that's a lot of use on the few seats that we have. And making an investment in renovating the bathrooms that we have was a real priority of the CAC, so we bumped that up to the primary priorities. And that's where we are today.
Okay, Board Member Maniscalco, I saw your microphone.
Thank you very much. So I was there at the ribbon cutting for this park, and I have a photo with Mayor Pam Iorio. I think it was my first ribbon cutting ever, and I walk through Curtis Hixon 6 out of 7 days a week, because I'm always on the river walk. And I'm glad that you mentioned the cracked pavement, because I haven't tripped and fallen yet, but I busted my shoes the other day because, you know, I hit it just right and it took a chunk out of my Nikes. But I was thinking to myself, and the attorneys are listening, and, you know, but it's a matter of time before something happens, because it's very, very heavily traveled through that area, especially along the Riverwalk. That's one thing. So I'm glad you're doing that. Second, while we were discussing the tree trust fund last week, we were getting complaints at the same time of trees getting cut up across from the Publix there on the other side of the river. How many trees do you have to, or are you going to be removing anything? I know you're going to add, but...
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because one of the things we did when we refined the concept is we're going to try to improve those live oaks that are around the edges that have never been right. And we think that it's because the soil was never right, and we're hoping that we can go in there and make some soil improvements.
Mm-hmm.
We've been learning a lot about that lately, especially with some recovery after the hurricanes. So we're actually hoping to make the oaks we have better. And as you know, we've lost a lot of the Phoenix palms and that sort of formal arrangement to lethal bronzing. And we're going to change those out to something that's less susceptible to lethal bronzing. So we're going to be adding trees. And like I said, if the budget allows, we want to put a row of canopy trees along Ashley. So net increase in canopy.
That's the one complaint that I've received from Curtis Hixon is there's not enough shade. You know, it's the great lawn. Julian Lane's a little bit better because they retain a lot of the original trees from what it was before as a riverfront park. But I'm glad that you're adding and not taking away, because we talk about trees all the time. And again, the one complaint I hear from the community is there's not enough.
Well, we have an opportunity to add here, because our proposal is to get some of that soil volume under the pavement.
Okay.
I want to say it while I'm standing here, so, because y'all deal a lot with the trees. In parks, we need lawn for certain things: ball fields, open play, event lawns. And if we put trees everywhere, then the lawn won't live.
Yeah.
And then we don't have lawn and we have to do something else.
Yeah.
So we actually have a great opportunity here to add some shade without diminishing that event lawn.
Great.
Board Member Carlson, I think is next.
It doesn't matter to me. First, similarly, I want to thank former Mayor Pam Iorio for her vision on this. I have a lot of friends who disagreed with the vision when she proposed it, but in the end, it turned out well. And when we're talking about the trees, please keep in mind there were a lot of sacrifices in there were other proposals on what to do with this spot, especially along the Ashley, and those proposals would have blocked the view. And the thing that she fought for, which I think was right in the end, is that it gives a straight line view to the river and to University of Tampa. So whatever trees we put, it would be great to have shade all over this, but if we put trees all over it, it defeats the purpose of why they designed it this way in the first place. So just to throw that out as a caveat, it is important that this was set up as kind of the front door of the city, so that as people are coming in, they can see how beautiful our city is, that we are on the water, and that we have beautiful Tampa Bay Hotel. And I think if you go back, those are kinds of the words that she said. One of the questions, I heard that at that time when there was a long time after they tore down Curtis Hixon Hall, and the museum was in the back before they built this. But I heard that to save money, they put grass on top of the concrete. Is the foundations of Curtis Hixon Hall still there?
These are the things that's oral tradition now, and we are going to have the design build contractor do some investigation and see what the actual condition is, and then design a field profile that will work.
Because I heard that the reason why it gets muddy and the grass goes away is because there's concrete maybe a foot or two down.
Yeah, that's
So-
very possible, but keep in mind that we're driving trucks out there on the grass, and so if it didn't start out compacted, it becomes compacted pretty quick. So we need to think about the entire profile, and hopefully, if we can't remediate whatever junk is maybe a couple feet down, we can create a profile that will work in the space we have available.
The other thing is that I don't want to get in politics, but there was a push to create Julian B. Lane to try to push all the concerts over there, and it was done without any parking, which I think was a huge mistake. But the other thing is that it was very unfair to the people that were at this park, that this administration, the last one, pushed people out. And the biggest example is Gasparilla Music Festival, which I think is one of the most important events of the year. It helps define the culture of our area. It has all different subcultures within it. And this administration essentially killed it because they forced them to go to Julian B. Lane. They gave them a date that it rained, and it hit them badly financially, and now they've not let them come back. And part of it is because of the park at the top, but still, I think the administration should have worked with them better on it. And we need to think about what our important events are. Turning the river green is not an important event. We shouldn't be subsidizing that. But big events like that, with like Gasparilla Music Festival, where people are coming out, it's drawing cross-section of the community, all walks of life, benefits everybody. Those are the kinds of events that we should be supporting. I believe in updating this. I believe in, if there's concrete underneath, fixing it. I don't believe in using CRA money for this. The community has told us over and over again that we should not be using CRA money for something the city would otherwise pay for. The reason why the CRA is being asked to do this is because the mayor hasn't put enough money in parks. There are parks all over the city, including South Tampa, that are absolutely falling apart. We can't get anything done to them because there's been not enough money put in. The city council keeps asking for more money, and none extra gets put in. And it's causing a lot of the high net worth people that moved in during COVID, they're leaving because the parks are so bad, the sidewalks are bad, and the roads are bad. We've got to focus on the basics. And I don't know why the administration thinks that they can come to the CRA with a handout. Although I understand that you guys completely followed the process, which I appreciate. I think we need to update the process, and I put this in the draft agreement, where we need to look at proposals maybe quarterly or every 6 months. This was presented to the CAC, as I understand it, but it was not given the context of anything else. If you have $5.5 million and that's the only project you're looking at, then the CAC will say, yes, fine. But if there are 20 other projects, then they might choose something else. The other thing, which I think is we really should not do, is that money was held. So a lot of nonprofits and others that wanted money were told that there was no money in the budget because the city was in effect holding this money and so it looked like there was no more money in the budget. And again, had the public and the CAC had a choice of what the projects were, we might have ended up with a different result. So it's not that you all didn't go through the process, but by holding that budget, it gave no choice for anybody else, and there was no real competition there. And so I'm fully in favor of on the city side repairing this park. It's one of the most important parks, probably arguably the most important park in Tampa, but not using CRA money. I think using CRA money would go against the intent of the public, and considering that the parts of the city that don't have CRAs are subsidizing this, they want their parks fixed too. And so let's get to fixing parks.
Board Member Clendenin.
Oh my. I wanted to go with you on some of that, because I feel the same way, but some of the stuff I don't know. It's the CRA that budgeted the money and held it, so it wasn't the city, it was the CRA. And I kind of agree with you. I think this is a city asset, and it's a very large scale city asset that is widely used by the city, and I would like to see this kind of budgeted into general funds for the upkeep and maintenance of the park. I noticed that the schematic you showed, that slide right before this, you didn't even have the dog park in there,
We identify it with a label. We're aware, we are staying away from that area since it will be renovated before we get there.
right. And one thing I really don't like is that permeable rubber surfacing. Hate it.
That only happens if we do the high canopy shade structure, because we won't be able to grow grass under it.
Right.
And we don't want to use artificial turf in the parks. There may be another solution. We could pave it, but people use those terraces for yoga and other fitness stuff. So we're trying to find a balance between how can we make that a place that can still support those uses without going to like pavement. And you
Yeah,
can do
just-
permeable
you
pavement.
just-
It's not as
you
nice.
got heating and everything else from that high rubber, and then
But if
God,
it's covered.
God knows what other toxins are being leaked into the surface from that stuff, but yeah, hate it. Don't like it one bit. You know, I don't, I mean, obviously, you're right, the lawn is a mess. We have to do better at keeping that lawn up. It's a park that's overused. I kind of wanted to see this project, because, you know, because of cost escalations, museums having, trouble getting to the point that they need to be able to build out. And a lot of the stuff that's happening over there, like they're paying for the dog park and all these, these costs that they're having to absorb for the expansion. I was kind of hoping to see a little bit of relief for them as well, so that they wouldn't have, they could use their funds actually for capital improvements in the structure.
That would seem to be within the purview of this board, if that was how you wanted to allocate funds.
Right.
If they're making some surface improvements on the riverside between their facility and that. Now, that wasn't in our estimate there, but if we're doing a design build, that would warrant talking to them first, because then there's hey, we're building this and now you're in the way, like when can you time it up? But it would seem practical.
Was it possible that we could continue this and have you guys sit down with the museum folks and figure out a way to, because, instead of operating kind of in a vacuum, because, everything that they've got going on versus what we've got going on, maybe there's a symbiotic way that we could do some cost benefit.
Potentially, I would caution that it might not save as much money if we're now using two different contractors to build within the same footprint. It might be better that they come to this board and say, we need more to finish ours.
Well,
I'm afraid we might not gain the efficiency if we try to lump it into this project that we would hope to gain.
Could I add to it or modify?
Yeah, go ahead.
So, we're gonna start again, because, Board Member Maniscalco, but I'm gonna go first. Ultimately, if we wanna put more money in the parks budget, we should have done that. We own the budget, it's our budget, it was our chance to move something from somewhere else, and it didn't get done. So that's why we are where we are right now. And, personally, that's actually what I wanna see done with the majority of whatever money we have left of FY25. I want that money to go to the parks, but it doesn't need to go to this park, it needs to go to the other parks. The parks in South Tampa, the parks in North Tampa, the parks in West and East Tampa that have been begging for it. So how do we, what's our balance here? And I think that is the existential question. How do we fund this, which is one of our signature park? How do we fund the maintenance of it? And is it really the CRA's responsibility to do that? So just gonna throw that out there. Board Member Maniscalco.
So if this is approved today, what is the estimated start time for these improvements? When are you looking at? What's the
So
schedule?
the way we were gonna attack it was through a design build and get the RFQ on the street, hopefully within a month or two. Because you have to build the RFQ, contract admin gets it on the street, then you have to 30 days, and you select somebody and that goes through the contract negotiation. Then they need some time to design and permit. So I figure they're in the summer sometime before they're kind of into design and permitting. And as I recall, the funding was split between FY26 and 27. So I suppose that design build contractor would probably wait until October 1 and then have their GMP all ready and do one GMP October of next year. And then we're like, well, that's fine, but we can't do anything from October to April in Curtis Hixon Park.
Correct.
Maybe we could do the bathrooms, but we can't chew up all the lawn and all the pavement. So we're gonna include in the RFQ points for being strategic about how you phase the work.
Okay.
And so conservatively, it's like a notice to proceed sometime in November, December of next year, and then try to put the bulk of the work in the summer after the event season next time around. I don't know that we can get there any quicker than that. They have the option to do some early work, and they could come back and say, we'll give you an initial GMP to do some of the first stuff, and we could get some stuff done potentially in the summer, in like next summer. And that would be the best way to see some stuff happening early.
Okay, no, the reason I ask is, just if I recall, I received at least one email, I don't know if it went to all council members, about one event, I don't know if it's an Oktoberfest event,
Yep.
but it's a
Yep.
signature event. I mean, it's this business's main item, and they were concerned about the date that they had scheduled at Curtis Hixon and the start of this, and that they would have to
Yeah.
cancel and all the chaos.
It's a
So-
legitimate concern, and so we work with our Office of Special Events, and we looked at the events for the last few years, and October's pretty heavy, November oddly light, I don't know. Then December, January, February, March, April, slammed, and it ends with, like, almost something every weekend.
Yeah.
And then you get to Riverfest in like May, and then you get to the hot season, and it's very few special events after that. So that's been part of this process that's been helpful, and sort of how we're gonna write the RFQ to try to maximize the benefit as quick as we can without disturbing all of our special events.
All right, thanks.
Thank you. Board Member Carlson.
Yeah, first to Madam Chair's comment about the budget. Yes, by charter, city council is in charge of the budget, but in practice, we're not. And what happens is the budget's already baked, it's presented to us way before, I think every year that I've been on council, we've requested roads and parks and sidewalks as high priorities, but the budget's never increased until this year. The roads budget increased, because they didn't want us to do it, I think. But the parks budget never increases. And the people in the community are frustrated about the parks not going up. And the problem is, by the time we get the baked budget, then we have to argue to take something out. We have to take something out of it to put it in. For 2 years in a row, I think at Board Member Clendenin's proposal at the city council, we canceled a downtown signage program. And we got all kinds of help from the administration for doing that. But it was the right decision to do, because we need to fix the roads. People are tired of potholes also. So we can keep asking, as long as the administration fights for whatever they put in the budget. We can't take something out and put something in. Yes, in theory we have that power, but we don't. The other thing is that we can put a cap on the downtown CRA, and we tried or talked about it a couple times. But if there was a way to if the administration came to us and said, well, we would have paid for this in the general fund, and they've got all kinds of pet projects in the general fund, like the Hannah Avenue and the Fair Oaks and West River and all that could have gone to pay for this. But if they said, well, we could pay for this in the general fund, but if you pay for it through the CRA, then maybe we'll go fix the parks in South Tampa or somewhere else. Then maybe that would be a way to talk about it. I think, but the other thing is that what's unfair about this is it's not just one, there are a whole bunch of nonprofits and others who have asked for money and been told that there was none. And so what I would suggest, adding on to what Board Member Clendenin proposed, is that we continue this till January and ask the staff to go back to all the people they said no to and say, bring all your proposals to the whatever the next downtown CAC meeting is. Let's present all the proposals. And they said, yeah, the CAC said yes to this out of context. But if you have 20, 30 proposals and the CAC still says yes, then fine, we can move forward with it. But they at least need to know the context of it, because we can't keep, what I don't like is if the city has a project, they hold them, we hold the money. Same thing with the EDC. We kept telling people in East Tampa we didn't have money, but there was $9 million hidden there or reserved there. And one of the things I put into the draft contract is that nothing should be put in the budget until it's approved by the CRA board. No, we should not be holding money for anybody else. It should be clear what the money is. So I don't know if you're going to make a motion, but I would just suggest, instead of talking about one nonprofit, let's just say let's open it up to all proposals and have them present to the CAC and see which one they prioritize.
I would respond.
Sorry.
I'd respond to you, Bill. I appreciate you saying parks are fundamental. And I would just, to Councilmember Hurtak's point, Parks and Rec is pleased to improve these parks from whatever fund source. And I laid out for Councilmember Maniscalco sort of the time that we're looking at. And the benefit of this fund request now is just the timeliness of it. If it goes to fiscal year 27 capital budget, then we'll continue to chase the repairs and keep the park serviceable until then, and then we'll make the improvements then. So however the will of this board is, but there's a timeliness to this process and request. So there may be some benefit there.
But, by the way, I've never met you before, and I look forward to meeting you and working with you, and I appreciate everything. The only thing about that is then the administration should have come to us a year ago and said, here's what we need, here are possible funding sources, what do you all think? And that's about creating a collaborative environment, which we should have. Instead of everything's all, and this is not about you, but everything seems to always be the last minute, you gotta prove it, or the sky is gonna fall. And we as a council and a CRA board have to push back and say, well, then you need to include us in the decision-making process earlier.
Board Member Clendenen.
Well, I don't think the sky is falling, but clearly there's issues that have to be resolved. But, I think we have, kind of like what you're saying, but with a different context. In downtown, we have so many unknowns. We have the Army-Navy complex with affordable housing components and things that we're going to have to, but it's an unknown. We don't know what that looks like yet. I'm working on getting Marion Street turned back over from Hart to us. That's going to require some capital improvements and capital investments to get that, which will eventually create more ROI and tax revenue on that street, but it's still going to be something we're working on. Obviously, the streetcar expansion is we're moving forward on that. Ashley Street, the United, as you've made a point over and over again about the need of coming out of CRA money versus the general fund. I totally believe, based on the timeline you just described though, because we're going to have a discussion on this council about leftover general fund money, that I think in that we probably will be able to find enough money, and if we can't, when we're wearing city council hats versus what we're wearing today, if we can't, maybe we can create the supplement for your initial part of the design part of this, and then, because you're not going to need all this money at one moment. So I think between the finding money, between the leftover money, and if we have to supplement it with something else, we supplement with something else on the design phase, and then we go fishing for either in the 27 money or in whatever other buckets we can find. We fund the rest of this. Obviously this project has to be funded, with the exception of the permeable rubber surfaces. I think so. It's just a matter. The project has to happen. It's just a matter of where we find the pots of money and what that looks like. So I think that we probably should continue this discussion until after we have as city council discussion about some of this other funding.
That will be the last meeting of December.
Last meeting of December.
That's
so
coming.
Put this on the January.
Put this on the January. So I would suggest we continue this to the January meeting.
So, anybody want to talk? So we have a motion from Board Member Clendenen. We have a second from Board Member Carlson. Board Member Maniscalco.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said you had not met Mr. Monk. Our office has worked with him several times, and he's really great to work
Yeah.
with. You always go above and beyond. So.
And he's
thank
got
you,
hair
sir.
like I have.
And he's got yeah.
And I had a great relationship with Tony Mulkey. I was really sad that he left. I'm sorry I haven't met you yet.
This is the other Tony.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll set up something.
So I, for me personally, this is a question of, are we rebuilding this park or are we just fixing things? If we're just fixing things, that's not in the spirit of the CRA. That's my concern here. That's not what CRA funding is for. CRA funding is for transformational work. And so I am confused and I get
Let's
it.
ask Shepard if this is something.
No, I get what we're trying to do. I'm just saying that, and obviously it has to be done. I completely agree with Board Member Clendenen. It has to get done. But how do we get it done? So if we don't spend the money from the CRA, then the people who want their parks fixed in the rest of the city will be mad if we spend $5.5 million of general fund on this. And I completely see their point. So I think this is one of those things that we need to see what kind of money we have. We need to see the availability and talk about it. I'm worried that we're just gonna push this to January and then still be in the exact same place we are right now. But if that's what you
Well,
all
at least
wanna
we'll have the
do.
December conversation.
Yeah, and hopefully the administration is watching and they will be collaborative and we'll figure out some solution. There are two tracks. One is the administration can look at other funding sources and see if there's some way to propose this. Or number two, we'll go back to the CAC and present all the different options and the CAC will decide. And if they pick this still, then you'll have my vote if they pick it in the context of it.
But the point being, I'm gonna go back to this. We own the budget. We own it. If we want more money in that parks budget, we're all gonna have to dig in and fight for it. Board Member Young.
So I definitely am hearing and seeing both sides of the coin, but I feel like, Cedric, you're trying to answer our question up here.
Well, I just wanted to interject and make one comment. Good afternoon again, Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director. And I've confirmed with staff, this is the only formal application submitted through the approved process by this board for this amount. We haven't received any other, there are no other applications in the queue. So that's why and it did follow the process of going to the CAC and then coming to you all with the process that you all have previously approved last year. So that's where we are, but there are no other formal requests that have been gone through the application process with the approved grant process that you all have approved.
Okay. No, any more? Board Member Maniscalco.
I look at it as, if we allocate the CRA money for this, it gives us more general fund money to put to those other parks. I mean, as it already has been mentioned, you know, just like we move the money around for paving to increase the paving budget. Now, just because we move the money around doesn't mean that it's guaranteed that they're gonna spend it. And that's why when we talk about the charter and any idea, one of the things that I wanna bring up is when city council or CRA, well, city council in this case, when we move money for something, it should be in the charter or written that that money needs to be spent within that budget year on that project. But if we use CRA money for this, again, I'm happy to support the continuance. It just gives us more flexibility in the general fund, because Councilmember Carlson's right. There are parks in this city, and I visit a lot with my stepdaughter, because we try to go to all the parks that you forget they're even there. You know, they're either not advertised, you get there, and they're in a state of, they just haven't been touched in years. And we look for a swing, you know, or a picnic table or something. But, I mean, just minor improvements, but they make all the difference when people that have kids and families, you know, that's the closest park that they have. And, you know, not everybody has a Curtis Hixon, or like me, an Al Lopez park. So, again, I'm happy to support the continuance. We're gonna talk about other available funds in December, and then we can just, you know, you told me the timeline. I don't think it's gonna throw things off. You know, we're talking 60 days at this point, and then we take it from there.
But then why are we gonna wait?
Can I,
To look at all options.
can I,
Well, Board Member Clinton, you have your mic on. Did you have something you wanted to say? before
No,
I go
I'm
back?
sorry, I just
Okay.
forgot to turn
Board
it off.
Member Carlson.
so, but here's the thing, the administration found and fought for the money for Fair Oaks, while all the other East Tampa parks don't get anything. And then $43 million or whatever, they found the money for 56 or whatever for the West Tampa River Walk project. They found 120, 140, whatever the latest number is for Hannah Avenue. They're looking for 40 for a police building to do evidence. They find all that money, and most of it's debt, unfortunately, but they find money for that. But we know that this is needed, and so why is there the expectation that they didn't find money for this? And what it's not like there's money sitting in parks that we're not going to use now. I want to push them to put more money in parks, and if they find an equivalent $5.5 million or something and put it in parks to fix other parks in the city, then I might support this also. But I'm trying to because we don't have any power to control or change the budget during the year. And so we only have that one shot. And as I said, it's already baked in. In theory, we have the power, but we really don't. And so I'd like to push them to come up with another solution. And if they're creative and collaborative, they'll come up with something. And let's try to get more money. Last thing, Cedric, you may not remember this, but in the last 6 months, how many people in downtown did you all say, well, you could apply, but there's no money? Because if somebody's told there's no more money, then they wouldn't apply. And so, why would somebody apply if there's no money? So, do you know how many people haven't applied that?
We only from 2024, we only received like 5. Yeah, please come up.
These are like,
State your name.
Hi, Melissa Martinez. I'm the Senior Project Supervisor for the Tampa CRA. So since 2024, we only received 5 requests for downtown for funding requests. And out of that, this board has already approved one of them, and this is the second one. We're still working on a couple of applications, but we have not received any requests that we have told.
if we approve this, will we have money for the other 3?
Yeah, yes.
And, okay, so, but my point is the ones that might have come to you all verbally, because anecdotally I've been told by several organizations, they asked and said, oh, there's no money in East Tampa or whatever. And my thing for 2 different tracks, if we delay it by 2 months, again, I'm in favor of doing this. It depends on what bucket. So 1, let the administration try to work on a collaborative solution to give us more money for other parks, or to put this in and we can use this a different way, or we make sure that the public knows that it's open, that they can put other applications in the next month or so, present them before the CAC, and if the CAC still prioritizes this, then you can come back and show us that this is the highest priority.
I just want to ask a question.
Board Member Clendenin.
Do you have money currently budgeted for Army Navy?
That's housing.
But I'm saying for CRA.
For the RFP, that will be, for the affordable, it's come from the affordable housing
And
account.
so is there
which
money
is
in the
different from
budget
the
for
commercial.
that? How much do you have?
Well, we don't have a request for Army Navy yet because the RFP hasn't.
But I don't know if they've had money set aside.
Yes, we have quite a bit of money. The 30% for the downtown CRA is significant. If
sitting
that's
there-
what's in your hand, why don't you come and put it on the
Yeah.
wolf for us? Because I want to say it's like 15 million.
Is it 15?
It's insane.
Well, that's not much insane when you're talking about the scale of
Well,
the project.
I know, but,
I'm just saying it's an expensive project.
well, I mean, and to go back, if we're gonna talk about the East Tampa $9 million, we owned that property. We're the ones that wanted to do something with that.
Right there.
25, I'm sorry, 25 million.
Oh, Wolf?
Unless this is fine.
Woof.
Line items,
Woof.
but you can see my.
So 25 million, yeah, we
You
have
see?
quite a bit of
Yes.
money.
Okay.
So we are quite, and it's true, we are kind of holding off because
Yeah.
we own that Army Navy. And as Board Member Carlson said, we own part of that, we don't all of it. The city owns some of it too, which is why they're the ones doing the
Yeah,
project.
25 is more than I thought we had, so that's a little bit more
Can I
comfort
just-
there.
Yeah. Board
Can I
Member
just say,
Carlson.
I said this before, but with my CRA hat on, my understanding is that as part of that deal, we were just providing the land. And so if there's a big expectation that we are gonna put in a lot of money, that needs to be cycled through.
Well-
And an amount, because otherwise, people can just write whatever check they want. And the other thing is that RFP was stopped, and I don't know if anybody else got an explanation as to why, but there are a lot of questions in the public, and questions about lobbyists and things, and we need transparency into that process and not just have a blank check. We need to figure out, even though we have 25 million, it doesn't go very far in downtown compared to East Tampa and other places, but we need to be really careful about how we spend it and make sure that there are projects in the pipeline.
Well, from my understanding, they put it out again because they didn't like what they got.
That's not the way I was briefed either.
Well, okay.
Yeah, maybe we need to get a briefing on that.
Yeah, maybe we do need to get a briefing on that. If anybody wants to do that for tonight, go ahead and write yourself a motion. So we are right now at the point where we need to decide what we're doing. I understand the possibility of postponing it, but I don't believe in postponing it so that other things could possibly come forward. I mean, this is a priority to do for the city. So if we want to postpone it, that's fine, but my vote doesn't change.
Well, the question is,
really.
but their schedule, if I'm hearing you correctly, we're not talking about construction until May of 27,
Seven.
right?
Yeah, to be fair, I think that the 60 days would be fine.
Okay.
The risk that we run is it's decided that this isn't how the money should be spent, and then where you are.
I think we're gonna find the money.
Yeah,
said
we would be
figure out where
done
we're
then
finding it.
until, you know, the budget for the next fiscal year comes out, capital or CRA
Yeah.
wants to fund some other way. The 60 days, because I think by the time they get through design and permitting, we're kind of coming up to end of summer, early fall anyway. And my guess is they're gonna do a GMP and wait for all the money to become available. So I think that 60 days isn't a deal killer.
Okay.
Madam Chair,
Board Member Carlson.
I believe Board Member Clendenin's motion was simply to continue it to January. I tried to add amendments, but he didn't accept them, so I think
Okay.
the motion on the floor is just to continue it with no ties.
Then we have more information. I have more time to chew on it too.
Well, then, how about this? Because I hate to just say, let's move it forward and then we're at the same place. So what about we move it forward and then get some individual briefings so we can kind of figure out which way we want to go with it? I mean, that,
I want, can you set up a meeting with me and so I can coordinate with what's going on with the museum and see if we have some things there too, just FYI, this is sidebar. Just,
but why don't we each just have our own meeting? Why don't we just sit and talk about this and talk about the funding and talk about where else we want parks money to come from? Because that's really what we're saying here, is that we need to solve this, and I do not want to come back to January and be having this exact same conversation. That's my only ask.
I agree.
So,
So I still motion to move this to the January, what is it?
11th.
11th meeting.
or 15th.
It's 15th?
Yeah.
January 15th.
Yes, and it is 15th. But with
Yep.
individual briefings before?
Well, I don't know if that has to be in the motion, but just understanding this.
Okay.
It's just, yeah.
Okay. Okay, so I have a motion from Board Member Clendenin. I have a second from Board Member Carlson. Any more discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay,
And just for your confidence, I have no doubt that either this board or the council will find
agreed.
the way to fund this project.
Okay,
so.
thank you, Board.
Without the rubber.
I agree
Thank
with
you. Thank you, Board. Well, see, and I don't think that the rubber is bad. If you're gonna cover a portion so
Yeah.
people can do yoga, then maybe that's the way it goes.
My Zumba.
Yeah?
Yeah, I want to, you know, if you promise to do Zumba in one of those Zumba outfits, I'll go up. I will pay, I'll
Okay.
personally pay for the
Okay.
rubber.
Okay, so, oh my God, did you all just shake on that?
We did.
Oh, okay. You start with karaoke and then all of a sudden.
He's out there in a leotard doing like,
It's about health.
who's help? Nobody else
Okay,
is watching.
so with that open mind in, thinking about the open mind, we are about to go into the meat of our agenda, which is number 6, the update on the commercial grant policy.
Yes, good afternoon again, Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director. The next item on your agenda was just stated, is the commercial grants policy update. As you know, we had the first iteration that was approved by this board sometime around June of last year, 2024. And since that time, we've found some things that we could have tweaked, and that's based on community feedback and input as well. And I'm going to call forward Ms. Dee Reed to kind of present. And the presentation you're going to see is going to be very similar to the engagement session that we held on October 13th at the board's request to field any questions and explain some of the changes that will be made and suggested in the policy update. I will tell you that a majority of the tweaks that have taken place, we believe that will be in the benefit of the applicant and the end users of the funding. And some of the other changes have been based on our CRA board attorney and making sure that we're in compliance with Chapter 163 and out of the crosshairs of folks a little further north.
Okay, and I do just want to mention that we do have a copy of the questions that were asked at the October 13th community workshop in front of us, and I just want to say thank you for those who attended. It was a packed room.
Yes. Thank you, Ms. Reed.
Good afternoon, Dee Reed, Economic Development Coordinator. As you know, staff is proposing updates to the grants policy or the funding policy and grants. I won't bore you by going back over the history. I'll jump right into what has transpired since our presentation in August. As Mr. McCray stated, on October 13th, staff held a community workshop and reviewed the substantial changes. We clarified the impact of the changes and provided an opportunity for public question and feedback.
Just one moment. We don't have closed captioning on one of our screens.
And the
TNI.
presentation isn't up.
And the
either.
presentation
Yeah.
isn't up. So if we could both get
There
the
we go.
closed captioning on one and presentation, we appreciate it.
Okay. So as Board Member Hurtak mentioned, you all have received a list of the questions along with the answers from the workshop. And that contains all of the questions that were asked verbally as well as some that were written on sticky notes. And we took the time to answer those questions as well. So at the workshop, we provided a side-by-side comparison of the current guidelines with the proposed guidelines. And we emphasized those changes being made with bold gold font. That is not the color that is on there today, but at the workshop, those changes were in gold font. Here we explain the changes being made to the policy and grant titles. We began with a reminder of the 4 key points that everyone should remember when reviewing the update. These changes only apply to commercial funding. Affordable housing and infrastructure are the only new construction that the CRA can fund. Multifamily uses are considered residential uses, and that mixed-use developments may still be funded under residential grants. So here we provided a side-by-side wording of the policy regarding the prohibition on new construction and provided examples of the types of projects that will or will not be eligible. We provided a side-by-side list of the policy language related to the cap on requested amounts and emphasized the new wording being added. To the board's concern regarding city project requests, we detailed the restrictions that apply to city requests, including having to receive CAC recommendation and board approval at the concept prior to an application being submitted. We provided a side-by-side of the policy language referencing direct and progress payments and explained that the only change is to allow monthly payments to the contractors. We used scenarios to show the difference in that payment process. We provided a side-by-side list of the policy language on legacy credit and explained how the TIF contribution cap removal increases the potential credit amount for each project. Again, we used a scenario to show the substantial increase in credit a potential project could receive. We went over the less substantial changes to the policy related to funding principles. Staff did introduce a policy change that was made after the August presentation. We learned that per the city attorney's office, the city's ethics policy prohibits CAC members from receiving CRA grants or funding. CRA Attorney Shepard fielded several questions during the question and answer session of the October 13th workshop on this topic. Other changes include clarifications within the application submission process regarding pre-application meetings and the ability to obtain permits prior to award. We explained changes to the award process and the addition of an appeals process. We informed the community of the revisions that are proposed to the individual grants. Here are the changes for pre-development grant, or the proposed changes for pre-development grant, as well as the commercial exterior grant. When it came to the changes to the interior grant, as suggested by Board Member Hurtak, we included presentations of items. We presented images of the types of improvements that would be eligible for funding in a restroom of a commercial building, and the changes that would be eligible in the kitchen of a restaurant. We also displayed images of the types of improvements that would be ineligible for funding in a restroom of a commercial building, as well as those that would be ineligible in the kitchen of a restaurant. We explained that special project grants will only be used for non-city requests under $1 million. We officially incorporated the existing funding requests for funding of $1 million. We also emphasized that city requests will be required to receive CAC recommendation and board approval at the concept level in order to request CRA funding, which must be submitted as a funding request. So during the workshop, staff was asked to provide underline and strike through copies of the policy and grant documents for their review by the first week of November. As of Friday, October 24th, a link to a new policy and grants update page was added to the CRA commercial grants page. As promised, both the presentation and the video of the workshop were made available. On November 7th, the underline and strike through documents were uploaded. These documents were significantly delayed in order to complete the required rounds of review before putting it out for the public. I'd like to just pause and just kind of go back to one of the statements that was made earlier regarding the Franklin Street being an example of the policy update. I just want to clarify that that project, along with others, are projects that were initiated prior to June of 2024 when there was no policy. And that was a part of why we were asked to, go through the restructure so that we can create a process in which those types of projects and requests could go through from a transparent position. So I'd like to just kind of clarify that this policy is designed to help those types of situations. Also, as we mentioned during the briefings, that on the topic of the concept approval, what our question was from a staff perspective is whether the board's intent is that that be applied to requests of $1 million as well. You've also received copies of the changes that would be made if that is the desire of the board. And those have not been made officially in the documents, but those are how we would have to, those are the changes we would have to make if the board decides to apply that same concept approval that's applied to city requests to requests for $1 million. Staff recommends the board approve the proposed updates with an effective date of January 1, 2026, and I'm here to answer any questions that you have.
Okay. Board Member Maniscalco.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the presentation and the briefing as well. I saw, City of Tampa is ineligible. I saw, certain different slides. CAC members, are they as of now ineligible for any kind of grant funding? I know we have a lot of people that have interest in, real estate and whatnot.
So that is correct. Initially, when we presented to the CACs, as far as staff was aware, it was only special projects grants because they come to the CAC for a recommendation. So we were under the impression that they were only ineligible for special project grants. However, since that time, we were made aware that based on the city's ethics code, they're ineligible for any CRA grants.
Even if they were to recuse themselves from the CAC board recommendation vote?
Yes. Unfortunately, that is the direction that we have been given from the city attorney's office.
And
We
that's
have
based on
asked
our-
those questions. We've sent
Okay.
a list of scenarios, trying to understand, which cases that people would be able to apply. And according to those scenarios, they are not eligible.
Thank you very much.
Board Member Clendenin.
It just blows my mind that we've ever done that. 'Cause I think it's a conflict, and I think it doesn't look good. We've had these discussions. I think that, obviously this board, this is like taking shots at rear view mirror decisions that have been made by this board, which was passed by 4 votes. And it's second guessing the votes that were made by the board on some of these larger scale projects that have been approved. We always have the authority to say yes or no on things, and I think arbitrary, as we've discussed when we were talking about arbitrary caps on these things, I think are ridiculous. Because again, there might be some, I don't even know what the future project is in the future. Maybe the facade of Tampa Theater falls down, and that we have to put it. Well, you say that. Or we have to put it back up. Or something. Who knows? You just don't know what the future. So these WEFs, you have to say that you have to get the votes of the board. Period. If you get 4 votes of the board, it's worthy of passing. Creating a rule that forces us in a position of having to waive our own rules is not good policy. That's just a bunch of people whining. And I'm sorry, and I know maybe it's going to make people mad, but that's what it is. People did not like the decision of the board, and they are second guessing the board's decision of economic ROI and return of the investment, the worthiness of the Straz, or worthiness of the museum, or worthiness of the $5 million we gave somebody else. And that's all this is, and I don't like it. I don't like it one bit.
Okay. Board Member Carlson.
Yeah, the ones you're mentioning were purely political because the mayor objected to Straz but didn't object to the aquarium or the Tampa Museum of Art or the Tampa Theater. It doesn't make sense. Why would you be against the Straz? Just because the last mayor was against the Straz doesn't mean this mayor should be. They're city-owned facilities and they're matching. We're putting in 25 cents on the dollar at most that they're matching, and that's a pretty good deal because we're gonna own all that. So anyway, I just wanted to respond to that. I hope that we can continue and make the right decisions going forward. And I'm not commenting about this proposal, but the concern of the public is that we're either not given full information or that the city has their thumb on the process. And we're out in the field talking to the community all the time, and we know they want a fair process. And so anything we can do working with our staff, these are our staff, even though they officially work for the city, we need to make sure that they're given the best tools they can to be able to make fair decisions.
If I may just clarify that while that is a cap on what can be requested, there is no cap on what the board can authorize or approve in terms of funding towards a project. The cap is literally to just kind of minimize what people can come in and request for so that we can consider more projects.
But how does it get to us if it's not requested?
If they're requesting $1 million or less, you're gonna get, in the presentation, you're gonna get the full project cost. You're gonna get what the CRA is recommending, so you.
We had the argument about the other issue we had with which ended up, I was right. You'll admit I was right. Because these policies, again, we vet these things, and we think these things fairly well through, and from different perspectives, not just from administrative, but also from a political, as Bill Carlson just mentioned. There's various different issues that enter into these discussions. And I understand from a staff perspective, creating a clean, easy policy that can move across a desk and move through staff quarters without entering the political realm is nice, and it's clean, it's sweet, and it's all these good things. But unfortunately, a lot of this stuff, it is political. It is political. It's a lot of these things are just, and it's also decision-making based on, some more, not just administrative kind of decision-making, but political decision-making.
Well, just so you know that that was implemented at the direction of the board to implement the cap. But, yeah, but we can, we're here today. If it's the desire of the board for us to proceed without the cap, we just need to receive that direction from the board, and we can make that change.
So I haven't had a turn yet on this one. So honestly, that's the thing that bothers me is the cap, and I don't know what the solution is to it. So for sort of the same reason, just today we had to go and correct it. You weren't here, but there the ask was for 202.5 million, and then staff and the CAC agreed to 1.75, but the 2.5 was still in there, and we just approved the motion, and we had to go back and say no, it was only supposed to be for the 1.75, and I think that this just needs a more debate right here, right now, over how do we do this? How do we, when looking at those two projects that just came to us from East Tampa, we need to kind of see what's in, not the pipeline, but the possibilities line. So we kind of need to see everything at once, and that's what makes it so difficult, and that's why Ms. Kopesky is sitting in, because we need her help with that also in looking at the budget for each of these CRAs as we navigate how to spend this money. But I don't want to put an arbitrary $1 million cap when if they need 1.25, then they have to come here and basically beg for it. I don't think that's appropriate.
That's what I want to see it all.
Yeah, it's,
Bring me the entire proposal
well,
and let me vet it out.
okay, first of all, put your mic on, but secondly,
That's like the third time you've vetted it.
yes, secondly, I'm concerned about the appeals process because you can appeal decisions made by staff to, it doesn't, who are we appealing to?
The appeals are submitted to the board. They
Okay,
would come
okay.
before the board and present the information as it was presented to staff.
Okay.
They get to present why they feel as though they should not have been denied,
Okay,
and staff would present as well.
And again, that's something I worry about too, because if we get some denials and then we have like 20 cases in front of us, so how do we find that balance? And this is why we should be having this conversation today. I'm going to send it to Board Member Carlson and then ask others to contribute more as well. Board Member Carlson.
Just narrowly, to one of the issues, you all said, let's put it all on the table. One of the things, and sorry, I don't remember if this was in the new rules or not, but I think we ought to pick to either approve or prioritize quarterly or twice a year. Because if, as we were talking about in some of the other cases, the cases come up and out of context, it's a great idea. But if there are 20 proposals, and there are two things. One is that you heard a lot of people in the back of the room this morning who are upset because they represent small nonprofits or for-profits, and they still are frustrated. They don't know how to apply. They think they've been turned down unfairly and all kinds of stuff. And I know you all are trying to work through that with them because I've sat in some of those meetings. But so one thing is to help more folks to participate, and that's one reason to potentially support a cap. But we need to build capacity, train, educate, get people involved to help them apply. The second one is timing. If it's first come, first serve, the best one might not be the first one, and then if the city knows the timing and presents theirs first, then they get the money with our other hat, we're the city, but where we are now, I call us a grant-making organization, and so we need to look at all the different projects. And for example, with the Strat Center, we're putting in 25% and they're matching it with 75%. That's a really good deal versus if we're paying 100% for a city project. And the same with most of the others that we partner with. Even the aquarium, they're matching like 2 to 1. And so I think we ought to just maybe to have this discussion, we ought to have the criteria, but maybe staff would prioritize, the staff would rank them and then present them to us maybe once a quarter and say, here's our recommendation or here's our weighting of it. And then we would look at them. Maybe there's some that don't qualify at all that would be knocked off, but then we would evaluate them and decide. And the reason is there needs to be a broader context. We created the strategic plan for the CRA, not the CRPs. We created the strategic plan for the CRA so that we could guide all that decision-making. And other than housing, it still seems ad hoc that people are just applying to us. Like, I don't think following our strategic plan, we ever would have funded the EDC project. We would have gone to nonprofits in East Tampa and we would have funded them to build capacity and supported them directly instead of paying somebody else to give them a little bit on the side. And so I think we need to, at some point, go back to our strategic plan, especially since we have a new member, make sure it's working correctly, and look at the context and make sure we're looking at all the different applications out there.
So if I'm understanding correctly, we're saying for special projects and funding requests, you would like us to look at accepting those on a quarterly basis, or accepting them but then presenting them on a quarterly basis?
That's just my proposal. I don't know how anybody else thinks.
Okay.
Board Member Young.
So we heard a lot from the public this morning, and my question would be how would this help to or answer some of those questions or address some of the comments that came from the public this morning, specifically in terms of like the grants policies?
I do not remember all of the individual comments. Go ahead.
Let me see. Just in terms of I guess, as some, like, pretty much what Board Member Carlson was saying earlier, just like, the actual process, who can and who can't, is it new builds, is it not? I guess I'm just trying to figure out, and then seeing from all the board members as well, how does this address some of the questions that the public had earlier in terms of like the grants process?
I'm gonna try to take a stab at, a lot of the questions that, and I can't remember if they were all specifically said this morning, but just in general going through this process, most of the concerns or questions or issues that we hear are dealing with new construction and then the change to the interior grant. Unfortunately, those are not things that staff can make changes to. That's the Florida statute, and we have our CRA attorney that has advised us in that direction. He did a whole presentation or workshop during the conference where he detailed why we're unable to fund new construction unless it's infrastructure or affordable housing. No, it does not come out and say in the statute that you cannot fund new construction, but it does specify what you can fund. And because new construction is not on that list, we can't fund it. In terms of the interior grant, and I can defer to Attorney Shepard or Attorney, and I'm sorry, I don't remember, Brackens. They can explain it better than me, but in terms of the interior grant, our job is to improve the appearance, right? How it looks. When you come into an area, does it look safe? Does it have a nice appearance? Is it welcoming? Those are things that we can do from repairing and making improvements to the exterior of a building. Repairing or improving the interior of a building does not accomplish that. And so that's the best way that I can explain why we cannot, or why we're making the change to the interior grant. Some of the questions in terms of people saying that mixed use is ineligible, I don't know how many times I say this, but I keep trying to convey that mixed use is not ineligible for grant funding. When it comes to the residential piece, that has to be funded through residential, and it has to go through whatever that process is. In terms of my division, we fund commercial. And so with a mixed use space, if it's an existing building and they are rehabbing or renovating or making improvements, we can fund it. However, if they're building a new development, commercial funds cannot go towards the commercial space of that new construction. But that has nothing to do with what they can or cannot receive from the residential funding. So just from memory, those are the main complaints that I'm hearing. And those are there's nothing, this policy, whether you approve it or not, it doesn't change any of that because it's statute. In terms of things that it does, that the policy helps, We have legacy credit. As it stands, legacy credit exists. One of the examples the example that we presented at the workshop, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but let's just say someone was eligible based on their project, they were eligible for legacy credit of, say, $15,000. But right now, it's also capped by how much they've paid into the TIF. Well, if you think in terms of CRAs, it's blighted properties, right? And so a lot of those property values are low. And so that means that the amount that they're paying into the TIF on an annual basis is much lower than than what's paid in other areas. So their cap, well, they may be eligible for $15,000. If they've only paid $3,000 into the TIF, well, now we can only give them $3,000 worth of credit. With this policy update, we are removing that cap. And so the cap becomes $100,000. So no matter how much they've paid into the TIF, if they have resided in that property, if they've resided in the district, or they have owned that property in the district for, I think it's 20 years, for 20 years, they're eligible for 100%. So that means they could get $100,000 credit towards their project. And the percentage does decrease, says it starts at 5 years, then 10 years, then 15, and I believe it's 15% at 5 years, 25, is it 25 at 10? 25 at 10 years, 35 at 15 years, and then 100% at 20 years. So, staff is not trying to not spend this money. We spend countless hours in team meetings trying to figure out how do we make this easier. We ran into someone that came into the office and applied for an exterior grant. There's a whole scoring sheet, and this person was 5 points short of the required points, and they could have gotten it if they made site improvements. However, because of the area that they are located and the way they're boxed in, they don't have site, right? So that was an unintended consequence. We sat down, how do we fix this? So now in that scoring criteria, we've found a way to where if they don't have adequate site, then they get additional points in a different area. So we're constantly trying to find ways to help people, but we have to do it within the guidelines of the statute and the CRPs. And so our hands are somewhat tied, but we do the best that we can with what we have.
Okay.
No, it's good. Beautifully said.
Yeah, one that was outstanding and accurate is based on my understanding of what you are dealing with. So perfect description of everything that we're having to contend with. And I think it's kind of frustration because there's a lot of very assertive people that try, insist on things, but it's not in line with Florida statute and what the CRA's responsibility and ability to, even though some things are worthy, it's not something the CRA can do. This might be for Cedric. Cedric, I kind of feel like CRAs are everywhere, right? Are we reinventing the wheel? Does anybody else do this process better than we, or they have a process that's better than this?
The same thing.
Yeah.
In some form or fashion. I will tell you throughout these discussions and our conversations with Attorney Shepard, we have looked at different models, along the I-4 corridor. I know he has connections with other CRAs that he actually serves as their legal representation for and what that looks like. So yes, there are other entities, but I can tell you that this is unique in Tampa. And, we've gone through the process to try to.
You're telling us we're special.
We've heard the concerns from the community. We're trying to, assist and subsidize however we can to, assist residents and business owners in all of the CRAs.
And I would like to add to that, just in conversations with Attorney Shepard, he has actually given us credit here in Tampa for doing things that other cities or areas haven't been doing, and he wishes that they would implement policies like what we have.
Right.
He has actually requested some of our documents to recommend to some of his other
Here's the problem is we have,
CRAs.
these CRAs are unequal parts.
Correct.
So, and I think that's the struggle, because what seems like a good policy in one what's a good policy in East Tampa is really, might be kind of just not applicable to Channel Side versus downtown or something as small as Tampa Heights. you know, it's so small, or Drew Park, you know, it's, so I think we're creating a CRA policy of all of these unequal parts, and that's difficult. I mean, if we were just talking about East Tampa, I think I may go with everything you just described, if this was just an East Tampa policy. But it's difficult to extrapolate that to some of the scope and scale of some of the other things we're seeing in like the Channel Side downtown, and potentially somewhere in the near future, Ybor City, or even, hell, depending on where something goes, Drew Park. You know, you just don't know what the future holds. So that's my concern. So I think you heard it. You heard it from myself. You heard it from what do you call it? You chair pro tem on a CRA, or what is that
I
called?
think it's just chair today.
Just chair today? So from Chair Hertech. I think this needs a little bit more baking, a little more thought on that and how that works. And again, I think you hear a sentiment. I think this board would like to just be able to vet these things with all the information, and then make a determination based on what is presented, the worthiness of that. And I'm very sensitive to the same thing that Councilman Carlson said. And I feel this way about a lot of different projects. Is like, what was the determination made that this was the most worthy way to spend X number of dollars? You know, we talk about that when we're wearing our council hats. We talked about that a little bit with the South Howard project. How was that, okay, there's no doubt that South Howard is worthy. It needs to be done. But when you compare it to everything else around the city of Tampa, did somebody say, okay, if we spend $100 million here, maybe was that the place to spend that $100 million? I don't know. Was it done? I don't know, because I don't know if we ever actually saw that. So I think we should probably do better about that. And if that means corralling it all together and then weighing multiple projects against one another and rating them, maybe that's what it is. Maybe that's what the future is, Bill. I don't know.
Board Member Carlson.
So my question would be, if your concern or hesitation is that you want to see them all, we just remove the caps and you see them all. I don't know that the whole policy needs to be delayed, and like we said, there's several applicants that are just waiting in the queue. We can do that.
Board Member Carlson.
Yeah, just a few things. And I think it's necessary for us to have this to and fro, especially since we have a new member, because we never get to talk about how we think about things. And here's a reason, is that the city, as we're going to find through charter review, has two, the way it's written is equal divisions of government. It's not always been equal in the way it's worked, but that they are. Federal government, state has three. We don't have a judicial branch. But in this system at the city, the mayor controls all the staff except our staff and can set policy and direction, and then we react to a lot of it as city council. We can push our own agendas and negotiation, but because the mayor controls all the staff, it puts us in a slightly weaker position. In theory, our powers are the same. In the CRA, the mayor's not involved at all in theory. This is a separate, it's like we're sitting as the CDC or the EDC or some other group. We're a totally different organization that happens to outsource to the city. And we can take credit or blame, especially blame if we don't do this right. And so we set the policy. That's why we created a strategic plan, so that we can guide this. And I would suggest all of you take the draft of the contract I wrote and take the one that's from last year and circulate them. Show your friends, show your supporters, and let them tell us what we should do with it. But it's really important that we make sure this money is spent correctly. You talked about other CRAs. I don't know if you all have heard me say this before, but I don't want us to follow other CRAs. There might be some that we could learn something from, but the reason why we're struggling with this is because we're on the bleeding edge of some of this stuff. We're restricted by 163 and some case law, but I've had long conversations with Cliff also. We're on the bleeding edge of where we are on this stuff. And the reason is that we all had a bigger vision when their predecessors were here, Nicole and Elise and Erica and others. We had like a Macintosh vision of how we were going to use this as a small little division within the city. That was the whole purpose of the strategic plan, where we were going to make transformative change in these communities. And even though we were restricted in how we could spend the money that we would spend within 163 could be spent in a way that would move other pieces that would change things. And this team came on in the middle of it because unfortunately all of them left, and we know why they left. But anyway, This team came in, and they've been trying to advance it to the next level and further refine everything that was left. And I want to say that I have full confidence in the staff. I think we have great staff. Obviously, they're very knowledgeable, and we can work together on these things. But we have to understand that it's within this. Although they're employees of the city, it's a different culture. We can create a positive, innovative, collaborative culture within the CRA, working with our staff and then working with the community. Unfortunately, after the folks left this morning, you all probably saw at lunch, but we got blasted on social media by a whole bunch of people because of the decisions we made this morning. And we shouldn't react to I'm not saying we should react to every response on social media, but the point is that there are folks in the community, some influencers in the community, who still haven't bought in to the fact that we're trying to create something different and better, and that we should all have confidence in this process going forward. And so I think that my recommendation would be that we have a workshop to discuss some of these things so that we can hear from the public directly and that the public ask questions and go through it. If not, we can pass this per that change you said, and then we come back to it at another time. But I think it's worth a CRA workshop to have the public really come in and post all the questions and let the staff is responding privately to them, but we don't get to hear the responses unless we ask. So it would be good for us to hear everything back and forth, and then we can help support the staff in trying to create the right structure for the community. Thank you.
Well, I will say that they did have that. They
Yeah,
had a community
exactly.
meeting in October. I was the only one who went.
No, I'm not talking about a
And
meeting that they have that they invite us to, a meeting
it
that's
wasn't-
here for us.
But it was a back and forth with the community. They did a phenomenal job of having people come up, and they responded. Mr. Shepherd was there in person. He responded. It was a these are all the questions that were answered. It was a back and forth. It was great. And I would hesitate on doing another one because we have done it. But my question is, I think the idea of possibly looking at these quarterly, but by CRA.
Yeah.
I hate to add a little drama into the mix, but if we're looking at different CRAs, because we can't do it quarterly and like April come and we're here for 17 hours looking at each different CRA. But that would be something I would be interested in you all debating amongst yourselves. How, if we were to do that, if we were to go to quarterly or 6 month looking at the reviewing a policy for a particular CRA, looking at all of those, putting an application deadline in, and we take a look at all of those, what does that look like to you all? Is that something that you think is even feasible? Or is that just like extrapolating your workload?
So, good afternoon, Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director. Hearing the conversation, it appears that the board would like to look at some type of funding cycle very similar to what we talked about with the housing applications, which we potentially, could do and would be happy to have that conversation. I will tell you, we've spent a tremendous amount of time over the last 6 to 9 months in the development of these programs and a lot of conversations and reviewing of documents, and we brought it forward in July, August timeframe, and we had anticipated, going live October 1. There was some consternation. We then went back as the board requested in October, and now we're looking at January 1 to go live with these active or the updates for the policy and grants. So we just like some specific direction from the board as it relates to what you all would like to see and move forward so that we can then adjust.
So I have one question before I send it, because this was, when did we pause accepting applications?
Was September the 10th was the last day to accept.
So we've gone 2 months without accepting an application, and right now we're thinking about not even opening it until January.
It would have, based on us, if we get an approval today, then that would allow us to prep, get all the documents,
Okay.
and just to be ready in January. If
Okay.
that is delayed, that date gets pushed out further.
That's what I wanted to set the table before we continue the conversation. So,
So
Board Member Clendenin.
I'd like to make a motion to approve the grants program without the caps, and then with the understanding that staff will revisit the
Second
opportunity. Okay, I'll end. Full stop. I make a motion to approve the grant program without the caps.
Do we have a second for discussion?
Can I,
Can I ask a question before you go for it? This may help. Is there a desire, or would it be palatable to approve the policy minus special projects and funding requests? Then we can look at the quarterly, the option for quarterly or biannually, presenting them to the board by CRA district. And so we would come back and present that to you, but we would be able to still start processing applications in January. Standard grants, I'm sorry.
Standard grant, okay.
Yes, but not
can I just
special
ask one
projects
quick-
and funding requests.
Well, first of all, we have a motion on the floor without a second.
Well, okay, so I mean, I'll amend my motion to what staff's request with the minus, so that wouldn't include the caps anyway.
Well, we would have to modify the caps
Okay,
because,
yeah.
no, the cap applies to special projects.
Okay.
So,
So
yes,
no, we
it would
wouldn't have
not
to deal with
include the
caps.
cap.
Right.
Okay.
The cap only goes to special.
So do I have a
projects and
second
funding.
first? Okay, I have a second from Board Member Young. Board Member
I want
Carlson.
to, I just want to ask Mr. McCray, he's our executive director, and you've heard what your colleague said, and you've heard, answering to 7 people is like herding cats, even though we're doing it up here. So I would just like to ask you, as the executive director, considering everything we've said, you may support that, but do you have anything else that you would recommend at this point? So you've heard all of us, you talked to the community, what do you recommend?
Yes, I think there's feedback, and you all have seen it. You've gotten emails, you've gotten the phone calls, you've attended engagement sessions. I think we have a group of folks that are ready to move forward in some form or fashion with the grants. With the special projects and/or funding requests, those don't come through as much as the standard grants.
Okay.
So, and ultimately, in the first iteration, you all had approved that on the staff level. So we've already been doing that, just with the minor tweaks that Ms. Reed alluded to.
Is there anything
and that
else
we
besides this
discussed.
motion that you would recommend? Besides the motion that she suggested, is there anything else you would recommend?
No, not at this time.
So I have a question then
Thank
too. Is there a way, didn't we separate these before and then we decided to mesh them together? The special projects in with all of this? Or has it always been together, but?
At one time, it was just special, okay, so it was originally just special projects. There was a point, I guess, when the staff that left, there were some things that were, I guess, I don't know the best way to say it, but we internally kind of separated them so that the funding request picked up at 500,000 and higher, and that has to do with the CRA's CBA.
Okay.
So it's kind of, those cutoffs were kind of tied to the CBA, which was not accounted for when we originally came forward. So that was kind of an internal piece there.
Okay, so maybe, is there a way that we could divest them again and have just the 500, I mean, because that's basically what we're gonna do today. We're gonna approve it for your regular requests, and we're not gonna approve it for special projects, and what's the other thing called?
Funding request.
Funding
Funding
requests.
request, yeah.
So there are special projects, so anything that's not a standard grant is a special project.
Yes.
So yeah, what I'm saying is maybe we just need to have the special project have its own little silo?
Oh, yeah, that's what we were proposing. Yes,
Okay.
special projects are gonna be separate for funding requests.
Okay.
Special projects is anything under, anything under $1 million.
Okay.
Funding request picks up at $1 million. So
Okay.
essentially, you could approve special projects with the standard grants and then just put a hold on funding requests while we can
And
go
we're
back.
still gonna
and-
get back with the bunching so that we can evaluate these programs.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think that I would like staff to come back in February to talk about those. I mean, January, if you can do it, but really February to debate how, I mean, if you have time, if you think we can talk about it in January, move these regular ones forward, and then in January or February, really figure out, like, but in the meantime, talk to all of us. Okay, is quarterly the best for you all? Is every 6 months? But we do one every single time we meet, because we've divided them up. So January is for, I don't know, downtown and Ybor, and February is for Drew Park and East Tampa, and March is for, like, do we want to do it that way? So I think that's what I would like to hear from you all as staff, based on the kinds of, the amount of requests you're receiving for special projects and, gosh, I can't remember that last one.
Funding request.
Funding requests, I'm so sorry. But something like that, does that
Yes.
work?
So basically, take this time, we can process standard grants, take this time to look further at special projects and funding requests, putting them on a cycle in terms of presentation to the board by CRA,
Yeah. So is that, you
and
kinda-
trying to figure out if it's best to do it quarterly or at what.
Sure, but you kind of gave me a face at January, which I totally understand. That's very close. But February better?
My only concern, the reason I kind of made that face is there's a lot of prep, if we are approving to start
Yeah,
the standard
okay.
grants, there's a process that staff has to do to be ready to
Sure,
start processing in January.
But that's why I'm asking,
So-
because I think it's one of those things that we need to know what's best.
I think February
Okay,
or
February.
March would be better,
March,
just
go
to
March.
give us time.
Well,
to-
my only problem,
Is there anybody, is it anything in the hopper waiting for this right now?
yes,
There
and
is.
that's the thing.
So
Yeah.
we actually have, as far as special projects, there are 3.
Okay.
Funding requests, I'm sorry, funding requests, there are 3 currently. in the
Okay,
queue.
so let's solve this first part first. Your motion was,
My motion is to include, can you restate what your request, so I have the words right?
To approve the policy with the exception of special projects and funding requests, and for staff to go back and look at the best way to break them up into cycles.
no,
So-
let's
Yeah,
start
that's what
with the first
we're
one.
Oh,
starting
just
with.
the- okay,
So
to approve the
my motion
policy
is to
and-
approve the grant program for
Standard grants.
standard requests, and then, okay, just leave it at that.
So my only change would be to specifically say not funding requests and not special projects.
Well, aren't we gonna come back on the second motion?
I know.
Those aren't standard, so
Okay.
if
Yeah.
you say standard.
Okay,
then-
so
yeah.
standard you've got? Okay, so we have a motion to approve these commercial grants for standard projects from Board Member Clendenin. We have a second from Board Member Carlson.
Oh, Young, I think was the
Oh.
second.
Oh, the original.
Yeah.
Yes, so it was a new,
Okay.
it was a new motion.
Okay.
Okay, so any more comment? Okay, all in favor? Say aye. It's Carlson. Thank you for asking.
Okay.
Okay.
And then I make a motion for staff to return to the CRA board. Do you want to do the March meeting, give them more time?
No, February.
Okay, so at the
And
February.
if we need more time, we can talk about it, but
So what's the date?
It's the
I got it.
12th.
February 12th, 2026,
Ugh.
to discuss, one, not having the funding limits on the special request and
funding, special projects and funding
special
requests.
projects and funding requests, and to discuss how to present the request to the board for evaluation
On a cycle.
on a cycle.
Okay, anybody have anything to say about that one? Okay, so I have a motion from Board Member Clendenin, a second from Board Member Maniscalco, and we will talk about those 3 in just a second. Let's just,
Is there something you,
The
Well, I
concern.
have, I'm sorry, Melissa Martinez, Senior Project Supervisor. My concern is that I'm not accepting any more, I'm not accepting applications at this time, so then I'm have to wait until February to
That's-
accept any kind of applications. I have 2 already that I had to turn them down or say they have to hold until this is approved.
Sit-
Aside from the 3 that I'm, right now, it's coming to you for review soon.
Okay.
We're reviewing applications, so, sorry.
is what it is.
and that's why I said we should probably talk about the 3 applications we already have, and see what we want to do. But we definitely want to talk about this, and we definitely want to talk about it in February. So we at
So
least have that.
let's get this policy done, and then,
Okay,
and then
okay.
if you want to bring those before us, just ask for
Okay,
permission.
hold on. Okay, so we have a motion from Chair, Board Member Clendenin, and a second from Board Member Maniscalco. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, now to deal with the applications that we already have in the pipeline.
When are you ready to bring them forward?
Right now, they're going through the application review. I'm hoping that a couple of them will be ready to come in front of you in January, the
Well-
February meeting.
Board Member Carlson.
Since we're looking to put it on like a quarterly review basis, why don't we make a motion to continue with the existing process through the end of January, maybe, or the end of the year, and then have anybody else who wants to apply, and then you can present them maybe through the end of the year, and then have people present in January, and there will be more than just 3 maybe, and then we'll start the new process after February.
So anybody that has the application, how long does it take you to process one application?
Because the problem is there are only 3 and there's no other choices because they've all been turned down. So do we allow more
So that's
choices?
That's all I have because I stopped taking any applications
Stop
due
it.
to
Okay, so
to this
so
process.
if you bring all 3 of those together, when would you have all 3 of those together? All in January? But all 3? I thought you said just 2.
I'm hoping that by January, all of them, there's issues with some of them that I don't know if we're gonna be able to resolve it by January, but 2 of them should be able to resolve it by January.
What's the pleasure?
I say if you're ready to go in January, bring them before the board.
Second.
Yeah.
The question is, should we allow the existing process to continue until January so she can take more
But
applications?
the problem is
It'll just
that
keep
you can't just
cascading
take
down.
an application. It's, as she's saying, there's all this work behind the scenes
Process
to
time.
make sure, because somebody's missing this, or they're missing that, or you're fixing this, or you're fixing that. So unfortunately, if they keep taking the applications, we're just gonna shove this down, like
We'll
this.
have 2 processes
We're
running.
we're gonna kick this can down the road and have 2 processes going at once, which is why I said February and not March.
Okay. Thank you.
So bring them forward.
Bring them forward in January, bring them forward.
Do we have to vote on that, or, okay, can you repeat the motion?
The motion,
The mo-
Put your mic, or,
The motion is that staff will present to the CRA board on at the January, was it 15th?
it's 11.
January 11th meeting, 2026, any pending applications under the old
Is
process.
it January? You are right, January 15th,
January 15th.
yeah. Okay, so we have a motion from Board Member Clendenin, a second from Board Member Maniscalco. Any more comments about that? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, well, I have to say, this has been a really awesome conversation so far. Really appreciate this day. If there's a question, ask now or forever hold your
I
peace.
just want to make sure we are addressing everything that you want us to address when we come back. It's the cycles,
Yeah.
that's it.
The
And
cycles
removal
and-
of the cap. and
Yes, the
removal
removal of the cap, and I think those 2 are great, because, again, I think that solves the problem. If we're looking at it in either a quarterly or a biannual, we'll be able to see everything at once. That's the
Okay.
goal. I'm sorry, Mr. Brockins.
I could be wrong about this, but because of the caps, the appeal procedure was for staff denied applications at the cap level. Am I right, or is that?
No, the denials, it doesn't, it could be that they're just not eligible, it could be they don't have enough points, there's different, whatever reasons that they're denied, then they have the ability to come for an
At a
approval.
staff, okay, all right.
So in terms of applying, well, I guess that's attached to the special project, so never mind.
Okay,
I just
okay.
wanted to make-
Well, again, though, as you work on this, do not hesitate. I always say for my office, but I'm gonna extrapolate it to the board. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. Give us an update on where you are. Make sure that we're all kind of on the same page, and or that you're getting the feedback, because I think that's what's gotten this where it is so far. And this is really hard. And I just want to commit. No, seriously.
I know.
This is really hard, and I just want to say thank you. I cannot believe that we actually got through this in only 3 motions.
And by the way, you guys do, I want to say, I really appreciate what you do. I know your job is extraordinarily difficult, and you guys have 7 of the worst bosses in the city of Tampa.
You do.
So,
It's like herding cats. Okay, speaking of, we are moving on to the housing portion of this.
Actually, if we could, Chair Hurtek, could we take 17 while Ms. Reed is
Oh,
still
okay.
here? Because I know that we that one was not
Yes, yes.
listed
So
under required
17
approvals,
is
and
the
then we-
commercial grant waiver.
Correct.
So we'll let Ms. Reed come up, and then I just wanted to see how everyone felt about granting a waiver in the middle of this process. Okay. Go right ahead.
I mean, do I need to go ahead? It sounds like it's a, you want me to go ahead?
Oh, I mean, it's not my,
Oh, okay.
that's not my decision.
I think what she's asking is if we feel that we should not approve anything in the interim, then she'd like to know now.
I have no interest in approving a waiver at this point
Okay.
as we're moving forward.
Okay, so anybody else?
I'm
have-
okay, I'm okay delaying it till the new process.
When would that new process be?
So, okay. The new, I mean, we're supposed to present to you in, February, but this is a standard grant. This is not dealing with special projects or.
I think maybe that's a sentiment of the board to approve a waiver.
That's what I'm here for.
So one thing
Member
would be to
Carlson.
vote it yes or no, the other would be to say it needs to go through the new process, so.
Would you like to at least hear what the circumstances are before making that decision?
Anybody? No. Okay, so what is the pleasure of the board?
I think what
I'm just herding cats.
Councilman Carlson just said, I think this needs to go through, I'd say, send it to the new process. So
Any
that
other?
everything stands on its own, and it just goes through the process. It either goes through the process and there's no waiver, it's just.
I just need you to know that this is because of direction that staff was given to the applicant. So if
Oh.
knowing, yes, and that's why I asked
Oh.
if you want to hear.
Oh,
Yes.
So I think we should just give him 5 minutes.
Okay. All right, so Harga LLC is in the process of rehabilitating a vacant fire damaged building located at 2409 Lake Avenue. You may remember the applicant was our pre-development grant pilot that was previously approved prior to our June of 2024 policy. We've completed that process, and he's transitioning into commercial interior and commercial exterior. As part of the application review process, staff often provides suggestions to help applicants get the most possible funding. In light of the proposed revisions that we were expecting to come forward with legacy credit, staff advised the applicant to delay initiating the exterior grant so that he could take advantage of the changes that were being made to the legacy credit. In addition to consistently complying promptly with all required actions and submittals, the applicant did decide at the suggestion of staff to delay submitting his exterior application despite having a tenant waiting to occupy the space. Unfortunately, the policy and grant updates were not approved in August as originally expected. So as a result, the applicant has experienced significant hardship. The inability to proceed with the exterior improvements have postponed the issuance of his certificate of occupancy, thus delaying tenant occupancy. Staff is requesting the board waive the requirement for grant approval prior to commencement of any proposed work to allow the grant to proceed, or the applicant to proceed with the improvements required to obtain certificate of occupancy and still be permitted to utilize the exterior grant. So essentially, staff advised him, had he submitted the exterior grant when he application, when he started the interior, he would be going through the process. But because staff knew that there would benefit him based on the changes that we were making, we advised him to wait until October. He did that. The policy was not approved in October. So now it's pushed to January, which is impacting his ability to get permits and occupy the space with his tenant. We try to help them get the best that they can get.
What say you, board?
Letter District 5 represents.
What are your thoughts?
I just said we're in a pickle.
Yeah.
I mean, this just kind of speaks to what you've asked us to
Yeah.
do, right? You asked us to help these small businesses.
Is that all documented?
Yes.
It's fact.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
She would come.
I know, oh, Lord. Well, because now you're making me go 180
Can
degrees
I-
off where I was.
Board Member Carlson.
Yeah, I just want to put on the table what folks have been posting about online, but, because it's all out there. But what happens is that if a proposal is by an organization or a person who's well-known, people think that there's some kind of insider deal or preferential treatment. By what you just said, it doesn't sound like it's
It
any
was
kind of
not.
preferential, maybe even the opposite. So to address the concerns of the community, because the applicant name is well-known, we don't want to do the opposite and punish somebody because they have a popular name and they have a legacy in community. So could you assure the public that they're not being treated differently than anybody else?
So I can assure you, we do not treat anyone differently than anyone else when they come in to the office and they request a grant. That is the whole purpose of why we created this policy, so that it documents the process across the board, and we follow that process. With everyone that comes in, we're looking at their application and their request. If we know that there's changes, this is not the only applicant that we made this suggestion to. There was an applicant, one that was spoken to this morning during public comment, that received that same advice to submit for interior and delay submittal of their exterior grant for the same reason. So it's not just this applicant. The only difference is that, well, there's other differences that prevented that person from being able to get the interior, but they are still eligible and able to submit for that exterior grant.
Because the interior wasn't in accordance with
Correct.
statute.
Well, no, it wasn't. They were under the current policy.
No.
They just did not submit all of the documents
Okay.
that were
In a timely
provided in
manner,
the time
yeah,
by
in
the
a timely
due date,
manner.
yes.
So from what I'm hearing is this applicant was timely,
Yes,
followed the procedures,
yes,
paused the procedures under advice of staff,
correct.
and because of that, he fell in a crack. And so now basically it's staff wishing to make it right.
Correct.
Okay.
And if I can, I do remember one of the comments that was made during public comment, and I hopefully can clear that up. There was a comment regarding it being approved, knowing that there was gonna be some level of, or I guess pre-development. It was approved when we were telling the public that pre-development was not available. If you remember, there was a version of pre-development that existed and had been approved by the board prior to the policy that was approved in June of 2024.
So
And it
I'll
was
make a motion to approve the waiver.
Board Member Young?
I was gonna second, but I already did. Yeah.
So we have a motion from Board Member Clendenin, a second by Board Member Maniscalco. Anything else? Yeah, that's hard. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so now we are on, wow, I think it's a really good thing that Sam has ordered Chinese, because we're gonna need it. So our last but not least, item.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, is, item number 7.
Yes, good afternoon, Cedric McCray, Tampa CRA Director. Item 7, as you recall, we had discussions related to housing and the
Correct.
funding cycles. There was a request by the board to produce a survey. We have sent that out. We actually extended the time. Survey closed on October 31st, and Ms. Parks is here to kind of share with you all the information synthesized, and then we'll discuss further steps.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Ms. Parks.
Okay. The Parks Community Development Coordinator for the Tampa CRA. Can I have the presentation, please? Perfect. Okay, so as you know, October 13th, I came before the board to propose a standard application process and cycle and for the unit creation and conversion program. We gathered some feedback at that meeting. Then, of course, it's been about 2 years worth of feedback for how we should shape the housing programs. But today, our discussion objectives include housing survey community feedback based off of that survey, overview of proposed timelines, and housing policy discussion. So let's start here with this feedback. So we, like Mr. McCray mentioned, we launched this survey on September 26th. The survey did include 12 questions related to housing needs, funding cycles, evaluation criteria, community involvement. Survey included a section for additional input on CRA housing programs, and we received over 90 responses. So let's move forward to the first question that was posed. The importance of workforce housing. We kind of already know this. Over 80% of the responses indicated strong support to address rising housing costs, neighborhood stability, and access to ownership and rental options. As you can see, I placed that result right there, right next to it. As we move forward to the funding structure, which is what I'm looking for feedback today about, is over 60 respondents did support the 2 application cycles per year. As you can see, as part of a formalized application cycle, should we have 1 or 2 funding cycles, it was a yes or no. The next question was, if the process contains 2 cycles, then would you prefer one for larger scale developments on its own and then one for smaller scale? So the survey did produce that they would like to outline opportunities for small scale developers. So again, one for large and then one for small. As we move forward to the most needed housing types, I posed the question, what type of housing do you feel are most needed in your community? And number 1 came based off of those. The number 1 option was affordable homeownership opportunities. Number 2 was workforce rental housing. Number 3 was the need for mixed income units. And then, of course, the family size units, which include 2 to 3 bedrooms, as you can see. And then though on the left lower side were the options. So it was affordable multifamily rental apartments below 80% AMI, affordable multifamily rental units for working families up to 140% AMI, affordable single-family homes for purchase, senior housing, permanent supporting housing for the specialized communities. So as we move forward, this is another area that I'm looking for some feedback in. So as you know, I propose each CRA will have a 5-member selection committee, including representation from CRA staff and housing and community development staff. In your opinion, which stakeholders or representatives should fill the remaining 3 seats? So we posed the suggested additional representatives came back as a CAC member, a subject matter professional, a community stakeholder, which again included residents, and the other option was community members, which could be a local business or a nonprofit organization or someone who represents that district. So again, they answered that question. Other feedback collected, so please share any additional feedback, concerns, or suggestions about the unit creation and conversion program or other CRA housing initiatives. Other feedback collected is as follows. Number 1, they're looking for qualified developers. So let me change that. They're looking for qualified developers. The second feedback was make application process clear and simple. And then an additional feedback was surrounding community land trust, And the fourth feedback was ensuring proper monitoring, and I kind of already explained to the community that when I did the briefings, that currently in-house we have a mechanism to ensure that our other loans are following a certain protocol, and we'll put that into place as well. And then number 5 was keeping developers accountable. So that was the other feedback. I also want to add to this, which I discussed with each one of the board members privately, was the other items that came up. You've heard this in the community, legacy credit as it relates to residential, along with a vacant rental program through the rehab program that we currently administer. And then they also wanted to see some type of pre-development for existing property owners that have been here in each one of the districts for a while. So that was also mentioned in the feedback. So we posed the question regarding scoring criteria, because again, that was really a huge component in the community. So out of the 3 sections, income, developer, and experience and property characteristics, when it came to income, the number 1 answer was serving the modern income families. Okay, so that's from 50% to 80% area median income. Second was servicing the lowest income households, which is at that 30% AMI. Then the third was serving workforce households, which range from 80% up to 140% AMI. So as you can see that, they ranked it 1, 2, and 3. As we move forward with the developer experience in ranked order, number 1, they said they expressed interest in supporting small-scale developers, so under 20 units. The second area of support is supporting developers with strong experience / capacity over 20 units. And another option was, again, noted creative out-of-box projects. Ms. Herteg, you and I always speak about this, seeing what's out there, us being creative besides your regular single-family homes. You know, we speak about that all the time. And also just making sure that the developer has experience to carry that out. So as we move forward to the project characteristics in ranked order, number 1 came up, making sure that we ensure mixed income housing options. That's very important for the community. The second is proximity to jobs and transportation was another one that was important. Number 3, adding community serving spaces in these projects, such as retail, green space, etc. And then number 4, ensuring energy efficient units. So that was very important to see in these projects. As we move forward with the emerging themes, so after looking at the complete survey, what are some emerging themes? Number 1 stands out. Resident representation matters in project review. So some of the solutions that we proposed for that was having representation on the CRA selection committee as a resident representation. The second theme was the demand for family-sized units. So again, this involves with land availability issues as well. So the proposed solution for that is including all of this criteria in the upcoming RFPs that are going to hit, the development community. And the third theme was the desire for ongoing updates. So again, I wholeheartedly agree. Project updates on website and GIS mapping page will help tell where the funding is really going to. So some updates again.
Can we stop there, because we do have some questions?
No, I'll wait, it's fine.
Okay, never mind.
You sure? Yeah. Okay, yes, sir. So let's move forward. So the initial proposed process when I came in October was a formalized application cycle will be implemented, featuring a structured process and a selection committee guided by defining scoring criteria. Key components include the RFA, which is the request for applications, create a transparent evaluation criteria, identifying scoring priorities per CRA, establish a selection committee of 5 members, including representation from the CAC, which is supposed to be the resident representation. So some timeline and next steps. So the next steps is to incorporate survey results, CAC feedback, and community input into the final proposed process. Develop the final program document to include standardized application and evaluation criteria, funding cycle timelines, and eligibility thresholds. And in January CRA board meeting, staff will present the final proposed process for discussion and approval. So this is how it looks right here. So as you look on the fourth step here, final presentation. So currently we're going through what we call the public comment period. So we're collecting all the information from the CACs. So after that will be the final presentation and approval. I'm hoping to do that January 8th, which the details are there. CRA board presentation of finalized process and criteria. And then the next step after that will be primary funding cycle opens, which I'm looking for February 1st. First funding cycle is open with all funding availability. Questions?
Okay, Board Member Maniscalco.
Thank you very much. A couple of things that I liked in the feedback that you received was the attention paid to small scale developers, 20 units or less. You know, it's not about 100, 200 units. It's people that are trying to get into the game, essentially, but at the same time, creating a product that is needed. So what was interesting was that the lowest AMI was not at the top of the list, because I would look at it as the most vulnerable should be the top priority. Get them out of that level of poverty, essentially, where they're struggling the most, but I saw that it was workforce that was prioritized above that. So it's interesting to see, you know, how that was on the scale, but, you know, based on prioritization. You know, we get a variety of projects that come before council, and I know that there's a goal of, you know, so many thousands of units of affordable housing, but at the same time, we have to look at all options, you know, and some of the projects that we approved today, you know, some have been years, decades in the making, and some are new. But no, that's it. Thank you very much. So the next step now is it's the open public comment period until the end of the year, and then in January you come back with the next steps.
Yes.
Okay.
And also some feedback on the funding cycle that I'm looking forward to today, and also the 5-member committee, just to get some feedback from them.
You already had my feedback.
Yeah, that's the last thing I want to say is the level of accountability. You know, you have a member of the CAC, you have private, public, you have eyes on everybody, making sure that it's a thoughtful and transparent process. As was mentioned in the last item, you know, is there prioritization? Is there special treatment? This, I think, eliminates all that, because you have so many levels of scrutiny and so many checks and balances that it is a transparent and fair process moving forward, based on the feedback and based on what you've laid out. So thank you.
Thank you.
Before Councilman Clendenin has to leave, does anyone need a quick bathroom break before? No, I got things to say too, so, okay. Do you have anything you want to say before you leave? Okay, we'll see you at 5:01. So my comments on this is the thing that, and I didn't notice it the first time we talked about it, but I just noticed it in this. Everyone's number one or the highest goal was single-family home ownership, and that is just simply not feasible in the city of Tampa anymore. And I think that was not an option, was like condo development or something like that, because that's the new reality. Like single-family home ownership is really for the wealthy at this point in this city. We don't have enough land. We've got to start building quads, duplexes, and then that's your starter home. And then you can go and go for a single family home. Like that is not a starter home anymore. Unfortunately, that's just not a reality here. So I think we've got to start presenting it that way. So that's one thing I'll say. Budget wise, that was my question. So what are we looking at? Are we looking at dividing it between the big and the small? Are we looking about equal amounts of money? Are we looking for a little bit more for larger, a little bit more for smaller? Or is that something that you are looking for our feedback on?
Yes, I am looking for your feedback on that.
So then mine would be probably a 60-40 split toward the smaller.
Okay.
Because I do believe that we have to do better with infill that is not single family.
Okay.
We just,
Noted.
and so what we need is, that's where the creativity comes into play. I really still, I've talked to you about this, want to do some pilot projects for some of our land where we can build triplexes and quads. Like duplexes, we've got that down. We need to start looking at other things. Quads on some of our transit-ready corridors, some sixplexes, maybe some floor-throughs, just kind of trying to figure out how we can house the most amount of people affordably. So
Noted.
that's my, and then you asked for one more thing.
It was regarding the 5-member
Oh, the
committee.
5 members, and I think my recommendation to you was 2 CAC members, was that it?
Yes, that was
Yeah.
your recommendation.
So instead of a neighborhood person, because that would be pretty difficult to do for every single project. So that would be my recommendation.
Thank you
Board
for that
Member
feedback.
Carlson.
Yeah, I agree with the idea of smaller projects if you meant, the accusation in the past is that we only benefit big developers. And we need to support the small developers and the nonprofits. There was an example yesterday, the Pittman Group, Dante Pittman and I mean, that's a great example. Folks that grew up here, went to Atlanta, came back, they're entrepreneurs, and we need to support them, and also the small nonprofits, and make sure we're not just supporting big ones. And you talked about ownership. I think that maybe this is a discussion for another day, but I think we ought to be like 70-30 promoting ownership versus rentals. The feeling of the public is when we give a bunch of money to a developer for rentals, even though they might be for 50 years or whatever, the perception of the public is that we're subsidizing a developer. Whereas if we're subsidizing a quad with a nonprofit or a small business, and they're selling those to people who live in the community, they don't look at that as gentrification, and they look at it as an investment in the community and in people. And so I don't know if you've heard the numbers yet, but they say the housing authority says there's like 25,000 people who are on the waiting list, but it's probably really 50,000. If we put in 100,000 each, that's $5 billion, and we're never going to be able to do that. So we've got to figure out where's our niche, where can we be most effective. And there's a tremendous need, but if we can help build intergenerational wealth and help people find homes, there are people in Port Tampa down in my district that African-American communities that were in the longshoremen that have been in for 5 generations in these houses. And one of the problems they had is they didn't insure them because they've owned them for so long. But if we can help people find stability, intergenerational stability with housing, that costs a lot less in the long run than subsidizing the developers. The other thing is you talked about the committees. Again, as I said over and over again, the perception is the city puts its thumb on the scale on these things. I would recommend if I had a choice between neighborhood and CIC and city, I would pick the neighborhood and CIC, not the city. The city can provide you all with advice, but this should be a pure process of the CRA, not the city. This is the CRA's housing policy, not the city's housing policy. And we, with city council, sit with the city's hat on. But if the city puts their thumb on the scale and pushes something that the public doesn't like, we're going to get blamed for it. So we need to make sure that we have 100% autonomy, because if our butt is on the line, we need to make sure that we're the ones really making the decision, and the community with us is making the decision. The other thing that got dropped out is the concept of neighborhood commercial districts. Before the staff changeover, that was central to everything. And the CDC's project was supposed to be that. There are several others, several of our projects, and the idea is to provide density on 4 corners. The Planning Commission messed it up by creating transit-ready corridors instead of transit-ready development in little pockets. But the idea is to provide density of housing on 4 corners, and then underneath each one would have a coffee shop, one would have a grocery store, and other thing. And the coffee shop would be a center of economic activity. We can only invest in the bricks and mortar, but if if somebody comes in and runs a coffee shop and they are able to bring in entrepreneurs, and there's no place in East Tampa really for entrepreneurs to meet right now. They have to go to Nebraska or go to Ybor or go to the outer skirts. So if we imagine in 10 different neighborhoods, if we had little grocery stores, and an example of grocery store is Jackson's Market. I know that's privately owned, but if the mother did a deal with a housing developer, they could have a bigger space that they owned and then take the money from the rest of the land and put it in the bank, but also buy, better deli equipment, other things that they want. And then there could be affordable housing upstairs, which would create a natural market for them. And that would be a win-win for everybody. But this is the Macintosh team thing I was talking about with Erica and Elise and Nicole that we were working on. It's thinking ahead. It's if we can't subsidize directly supporting entrepreneurs, we can create a space where entrepreneurs can meet. And then through the city or our nonprofit activities, we can try to bring successful CEOs to coach them and help them network and help them help each other. I was at a networking event recently where there's a lady who has a janitorial company, and there were a couple other entrepreneurs that have janitorial companies, but this lady has done her marketing so well that she's now a referral service to the other janitorial companies. It was just a brilliant idea, and she was working with one or two of them in the room. And so you never know, like, she goes to a meeting, she meets a janitorial company, she says, hey, I can be a referral service to you because I'm really good at marketing. If you want, I get a little percentage. And it's a win-win for everybody, but we have to provide the spaces for them to meet. So I would encourage us to think not just about housing and not just about subsidizing, but how are people going to use this space, and what does it mean for the neighborhood and for the community? Thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, I believe you have some marching orders.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay, do we have any old business? Do we have any new business? Yes, Board Member Maniscalco.
This is on behalf of Councilmember Vieira.
Okay.
As noted in a previous memo, he would be out of town, so I'm doing this. A motion to amend Board Member Vieira's December 11th, 2025 motion regarding wheelchair accessible playground equipment to include an update on existing disability park funding in the budget and an explanation for the amount spent so far and a plan for implementation for parks within the CRA.
Okay, do we have a second? I'm sorry, yes.
I was going to ask for a point of clarification. Is that in the CRA's budget?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir, within the CRA. And I have a copy of the motion here.
Okay. So I have a motion from Board Member Maniscalco, a second from Board Member Carlson. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Move to receive and file?
Well, I have something as well. So go ahead. Nope.
Number one, there was a tragic incident the other day, and we talked about it this morning. But one of the things we've got to address as a city is racing. And there's way too much racing going on through the city. I've actually had people who raced as kids who said maybe we ought to create a racetrack somewhere where kids can actually, or not kids, but people who can drive can actually go there. But we've got to, I don't know if the CRA can help, and maybe we can talk about this at City Council, but we need to solve the issue of racing, because the beginning of all this was people racing and driving too fast. And then there are all the other issues. Another thing, I just want to throw out an idea, and not to vote on it today, but there are a lot of projects that are coming to us with 140 and higher AMI. Again, we don't have $5 billion to solve the entire housing problem. If we're going to focus, what the community is asking us to focus is like on the 30-40% AMI. I think we ought to put across the board rule, maybe I should have said this a few minutes ago, on not going above 100% AMI or not going above 80%.
I think that we do that in every district except downtown. Downtown is just a very difficult place to do that. So I think the only place we've ever approved 140 is downtown. Now, for home ownership, with the city's urban infill projects, we have had to go to 140 because people can't afford to buy them. But by and large, I mean, I think we could say that, but I mean, her housing study showed that actually people want to 80%, 50 to 80, so.
Another thing, and I have no choice but to talk about this publicly, and I'll try not to talk about names too much, but there's one case, and you all know who I'm talking about, I can throw out names if you want, but that's the hair salon that has other spaces next to it that they wanted to get a grant. And they went through, because of the change in the grant process and everything, they went through a lot of difficulty, and it's caused quite a bit of concern in the community because of all that process. And I worked with Cedric and his team on it, and Cliff, and maybe others have worked on it. But I wonder if we could, as a case study, bring one like that forward and just have everything presented in public so we could figure out, is there a solution for that, and how could we have fixed it? Do you all, I mean, have you all worked on that case at all?
Yes, somewhat, and I think that, yeah, it's definitely a discussion to have, but I think we're trying to fix that with both the commercial and the housing.
Maybe, since we have Board Member Young on, maybe you know what I'm talking about, and you could follow up with them and see if you have any ideas. But maybe sometime in the future, if we can't resolve it individually, maybe there's a way that the short form that happened is she thought she was following the rules. She hired a contractor, and it turned out the contractor didn't have the right license, and so that stopped the whole process. And then we changed our process in the middle. The last thing, real fast, is I can't send this to you outside, but I go to London about once a year, and they just put in these bollards that look like there's a couple for the here, I'll give you this one.
No, here, I've got it.
But London, in the Westminster Bridge, which is the one next to Big Ben, it is a historic area, and they had an incident a few years ago where somebody drove a truck through the crowd on the bridge and hurt and killed a bunch of people. And they had huge bollards and barriers up for several years, but recently they put up these ones that look like they're historic and fit in with the ambiance. And so there are lots of solutions about what to put in Ybor, but if we're going to do something like bollards, I would recommend we do something that fits in with the architectural style of Ybor.
Well, that's actually what I was going to make a motion about, is having a community meeting to talk about the next steps, and the CRA needs to be intimately involved with that, because we can use the money. We can use money from TPD. Board Member Maniscalco.
So I've walked across this, I guess, this bridge here. So I've seen these in person. What I was thinking, when you go to the Riverwalk at Waterworks Park, there are two things. First, you'll see, actually no, this is going to be at the River Center, near the River Center at Julian Lane, but they have I guess they're bollards, but there's 3 in a row, and the center one has a lock that's removable, so if a maintenance vehicle needs to get through or something, you can do that. I know we're talking about 7th Avenue, if this is going to be Ybor City. That's one thing that we have up, but also, you may have seen them in downtown on the sidewalks, but as you go to the Riverwalk from Waterworks Park, going into the Riverwalk towards the first overpass, there are the blue metal, they're like L-shaped.
Yep, to
So
prevent the golf carts.
Yeah, so you can't, drive a car onto the Riverwalk, but those, if they're talking about closing 7th Avenue or peak hours or whatever, those are things that we can put out that are at least temporarily. If there's an issue with the historic design, or if we can't figure something out, at least we can put that up, and that will prevent, or can prevent, a car coming in.
But that's exactly it. Like, we're going to be talking about this. Like, I'm bringing a motion tonight for council to talk to encourage the administration to do just a community session to talk about this. And I think that everything needs to be on the table. I think we need to do something though with the CRA being able to fund it. And I think that's the
Just
issue.
one last thing about it. As Tom DeGeorge said this morning, people jump to conclusions real fast, and they come after the shooting a couple of years ago. Folks said we need to shut down Ybor at midnight. Well, we didn't have any full information, and we found out that the people were underage. They didn't go in any of the bars. So had we jumped to that conclusion, it would have been the wrong conclusion. And in fact, it appears that part of the reason why that incident happened is because 7th Avenue was closed early. Usually it's closed, I forgot, the police chief talked about it, but about 2:45, but it was closed about 2 o'clock. So these young people came racing in. There's video of them going behind the Italian club and going out and then shooting. We know from the 90s that closing 7th Avenue didn't work. the mayor and I rarely agree, but she believes that we shouldn't close down 7th. Burkhaw believes that we shouldn't close down 7th. And I think we need to, if we have a public forum, I think we need to at least put some philosophy and ideas out there. And then we can hear all the ideas with the public, but I will definitely not vote for shutting down 7th for safety reasons. Orlando just, you can Google it, but Orlando in January, because they had an incident before that, they reopened the streets in Orlando because it was too dangerous to keep them closed.
But here's the thing, you can't, that's exactly what we just asked. That's what we've been saying all day, is that we're gonna listen to the community, and the community is telling us they want to talk about shutting down 7th Avenue. I'm not going one way or the other, I'm just saying that the community wants to have a space to talk about it, and I think that that's where we should go. But, Councilwoman Young.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad we're talking about it, and one of my main concerns is I wanted to be sure that we did not leave this meeting today without bringing it up with the course of action, because I'm sure all of us have just been seeing the discourse and people really wanting to know what are we going to do as a next step. And so I think it's important, for us, just as CRA board, but, wearing our CRA hats, but, later this evening, our city council hats, figuring out what is like an actionable item and a next step. I know Cedric and I did talk. I think there is something that CRA, or there's some that CRA can do to help with that. But if it's some kind of study, if it's a workshop, just something to get the conversations, and then actually have like an actionable, tangible item, and where community can feel safe, because ultimately I think we all want to be sure that 7th Avenue is safe, but also pedestrian safe as well, and that people can go out and enjoy themselves on 7th Avenue. So I want to be sure that we leave here today with an actionable item, and community can say, okay, they are doing X, Y, and Z.
We'll hear from Director McCrae, but also, I mean, with our CRA hats on, there's not as much we can do. We could probably bring it forward in December if we actually choose to fund something. Board Member McCrae, or Director McCrae?
December would be very tight because of the deadline that we're under for next month due to the holiday and the like. I think January would be a little bit more palatable.
If we needed to bring something back in old business, we could probably squeeze it in then. But it really just depends on what the community wants. But just to refresh the public's memory, what are some things that we can spend that on? Or would you like me to ask Mr. Shepherd?
So he's actually, yes, I think he's ready to opine. He just sent me a message saying that he was ready. But
okay.
What Board Member Young is referring to is some funds within the Ybor City CRA budget for police and community innovations. And I'll yield because we have to be able to justify that expense. And Attorney Brackens or Attorney Shepherd, whoever wants to.
Yeah, we'll start with Mr. Brackens and then.
I think.
Are y'all able to hear me?
Sorry.
All right.
Sorry, Mr. Shepherd, go ahead.
I'll let him talk.
Yes, I'm sorry that I missed out on the the commercial grants discussion because I tried to weigh in, but I couldn't be heard. But I definitely want to be heard on this. So there's a very specific provision of the statutes in terms of what you can spend CRA money on that talks about what are called community policing innovations. And I've been asked multiple times, what does that mean? And the answer is, I don't know. But that's not a bad thing. And here's why. To me, in terms of being defensible, what you need is someone who is an expert in law enforcement and community policing. And those folks are all over the place. Your own TPD may have some examples of people that you could reach out to. But the bottom line, as far as I'm concerned, is if an expert, properly credentialed in law enforcement, says that what we are trying to spend money on constitutes, in his understanding or her understanding, a community policing innovation, then we could spend money on it. So if that's bollards, if that's pop-up bollards, if you're familiar with those, if it is any number of other things, cops on bikes, I can't even go through all the possibilities because I am not a police guy, nor did I stay in the Holiday Inn Express last night. But what I'm telling you is what you first need to get to the place where you can justify the expenditure is someone telling you that what you want to do is a community policing innovation.
Okay, thank you. Board Member Maniscalco.
No.
Oh, okay. Board Member Carlson.
Yeah, if I could just add to, first of all, I mentioned street racing was the beginning of all of this. And Ybor City was very unlucky because Ybor City always gets blamed for being a dangerous place. Like a day or two before this, I had 40 private equity people in Ybor City with others trying to tell them it's a safe place, and then this happens, and the same thing happened a couple years ago. The folks in Ybor, this was a different situation, but there is a general worry about crime in Ybor City, and I've talked to a lot of police officers. I've talked to TPD. I've talked to Chief Burkaw, and there are things that they can do. That some of the people in Ybor are so frustrated they went to the state to fund the sheriff to help. But we've got to, because of the changing nature of Ybor, we've got to make sure it's safe. And so along those lines, maybe Chair Hurtak was going to say this, but I think we ought to either ask Chief Burkaw to come back with some recommendations, and/or the city outsourced to a professor at USF a few years ago, who's a crime specialist, and we need this answer on the city side and also on the CRA side, but specifically for CRA. If we're allowed, I don't know, Cliff, if we're allowed to use any money to pay a USF professor, or to reimburse the TPD for some of the time. But if they can come back specifically with recommendations to look at the situation and come back with recommendations that the CRA can fund, that would be very helpful.
Yes, I can answer that briefly and tell you that studies, among those things you could spend money on. So a study of what would be the appropriate community policing innovations is one of the permitted expenditures under the provision that says you can only spend money on these things. It's one of the only.
And I'm not talking about a 6-month-long study. Like, if we can't do it in December, come back in January, because the community wants it.
That fast. Studies aren't that fast.
They know, for example, that that closing down Ybor is a really dangerous idea. For example, there are some pros and cons to bollards. There are pros and cons to other solutions, but we're not going to be able to anticipate everything, but in general, we need to make Ybor safer.
Yes, I agree that we need to make Ybor safer, but I think the larger discussion is and that people don't want to talk about, is the chase policy of the Florida Highway Patrol. Folks say that the guy didn't stop, but that's ultimately we're asking those folks to protect us. TPD does a fabulous job protecting us and doesn't have a chase policy. And that is what I'm hearing from the community that they want to talk about. We can't do anything about that here. We can talk about other safety measures, but I don't want to ignore the elephant in the room, which is, if there wasn't a chase, this wouldn't have been a thing. And so I think that ultimately we can ask, we need to talk with our city hats on, because we have a lot more latitude as city council people. But ultimately, I just think the community still needs to be heard. Before we put any money into anything, hopefully Chief Burkaw can do a community meeting in Ybor. We've had them before, to listen to the whole community, not to just say, no, we're not going to do this, but just to listen and to hear what people have to say. I think now is the time for listening, and then action shortly thereafter. And if we need funding, we can come back and do that in December. I still think that we can easily slide in under new or old business if we need to do some type of funding request.
Ma'am,
Yeah.
I think with a certain bit of information, I agree with you. We need to listen to the public, but we also need to put out certain information. If the public says we want that, then we can try to figure it out. But another thing in looking at hybrids, I know you all have had a lot of conversations like I have. One of the issues also was that the person was able to get off 275 and go straight down 7th. And so one thing would be to block Nuccio in 7th, so that you have to go around, not to block off all of 7th, but to just to keep people, block off the entrances that to keep people from racing in at high speed. So if they had to go down to the roundabout and come back, they would have had to slow down.
Sure, sure. No, Board Member Young.
So, so I would also say that having a workshop and listening is part of the action. And there's so many, I know, I'm pretty sure all of us have done our, research. There's so many, different actions that we can take or may not. But I think that is where we have, our, community policing innovation that can, have maybe a listening workshop, and then once we put on our, city council hats, where we can go, a step further, because these are like safety, solutions, like not just for, right now, but for the long term, and what that looks like. If it's, if it's the traffic lights, if it's crossing off the exit that goes to 7th, if it's the ballards, if it's only, ballards for a patio. I mean, there's so many options out there, but I think actually having the conversation and putting everything out on the table of what we can do, talking to law enforcement, talking with mobility, talking to everybody, what is out there that is actually something that we can adopt for the long term. And especially as a city, if we're going to continue to grow, we may have other, entertainment type districts that we can take this policy and adopt it to make sure that throughout the city we have pedestrian safe and just safe, entertainment districts in general.
Absolutely. Okay, so to be continued. Yeah, I'll do one motion tonight because it's not really here. And I mean, I hate to say it, this isn't a city council decision, more or less. It's the administration that does this, but we want to help. And I think any way we can help is to encourage the conversation. So yes, I'll do a motion with our city council hats on. But Board Member Carlson?
Can I also just say, Board Member Young mentioned entertainment districts, and you may have seen the meetings that we had before, but there actually is no designation for entertainment districts. Ybor became an entertainment district because in the 90s, and I was talking to a former council member the other day who helped approve them, they approved a whole bunch of them because they thought that would spur economic growth. But instead it inadvertently created a bar district, and the people in the community didn't necessarily want that. It was one license at a time. And then Howard Avenue, I used to be on one of the boards adjacent to it. It was never designated an entertainment, but it became one because of all the alcohol licenses. And so that's another issue that we have to wrestle with at some point is, do we really have entertainment districts? Ybor, I think the people that own the property anyway don't want it to be an entertainment district in the future. So we got to wrestle with that and then figure out, but where are people congregating? Like it's a good point you mentioned, South Howard, people are walking on the streets too. If we're going to do bollards, we probably got to do them there or figure out some kind of safety issue. And then there's starting to be concentrations up in Seminole Heights and around near Tampa Heights. And so how do we deal with the pedestrians? Some of those roads are really fast as well.
Well, I mean, ultimately, this is a conversation about speed. And it's definitely something we need to have, and I'm glad we're talking about it now. And just definitely want to continue the conversation. But we have a motion to receive and file. Do we have a second? We have a second on that. We also have some folks who want to come in and congratulate you, so we're going to stay here for a minute. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Okay, we are adjourned for 40 minutes. The Juneteenth ladies are here. Yeah. Yep. Yeah.